here tonight, particularly on a very snowy day. It is my privilege to call this meeting to order. There are copies of our agenda on either side of the room. If you'd like to pick one up and follow along with our proceedings tonight, we welcome you doing so. There's a couple of things that we're going to move around tonight, just a fair warning. You probably noticed that public comments of a general nature are going to be a little bit later in the agenda, and we're also going to move council member reports down that part of the agenda as well, so we get to some of our other business towards the front of the meeting. Well, it is our proud custom to begin our meetings by reciting the Pledge of Allegiance, and tonight we have some very special guests who are going to help us do that. We have Wolf Den Pack 57. We have 4 representatives here tonight, and they promised me they were going to come up here and help us lead in the Pledge of Allegiance, so I'm going to invite them to come on up. I think they were a little intimidated by the Downers Grove Panther cheerleaders. Unfortunately, guys, it's like that for the rest of your life. So the scouts are up here in front, and we're all going to stand up. Join the pledge. Gentlemen, please turn around. The flag's behind you. Let's get your scout salutes out. We're going to lead us in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Awesome job, guys. I got to turn around for that obligatory photo. Otherwise, how do you get on Facebook? Thank you very much, Scouts. All right, next item of business, I'd like to ask our fine village clerk, April Holden, to please call the roll.
Commissioner Jose?
Here.
Commissioner Olson?
Here.
Commissioner Rankin? Here. Commissioner Barnett?
Here.
Commissioner Newstead?
Here.
Commissioner Durkin?
Here.
Mayor Tully?
Here. Thank you very much. That brings us to item 3, which is proclamation honoring some of our very special guests. Ladies and gentlemen, we have state champs in the house with us today, and so we know that Downers Grove is home and host to many state champions, and we want to make sure that you receive some recognition, young ladies. So we have a proclamation that I'm going to read and then present to your coaches, and then I'm going to ask them to maybe say something real quickly, and then you think all of you can fit up here? You think so? You're probably used to getting your pictures taken. The tours, the media offers, the sponsorships, it's probably never ending, right? And the agents, don't forget those phone calls. Well, if you need an agent, talk to me afterwards. So here's the proclamation. Whereas the 2nd grade Downers Grove Panther cheerleaders won the 7th annual Illinois Recreational Cheerleading Association Cheer and Dance State Championship on December 7th, 2014 at the Sears Center Arena in Hoffman Estates. And whereas the girls learned 18 cheers for game days, as well as memorized a dance routine for competitions. And whereas the team competed in 2 competitions before moving to the state competition. And whereas the team practiced 3 days a week for 2 hours a day to prepare for the competition season. Now therefore, I, Martin T. Tully, Mayor of the Village of Downers Grove, do hereby proclaim Tuesday, February 3rd, 2015, to be Downers Grove Panthers Cheerleading Day in our community, and invite all citizens to join in celebrating with the team and their coaches, Shannon and Jeff Zimowitz, in acknowledgement of their hard work, dedication, and sportsmanship. Congratulations, girls. You guys are the professionals, so I'm going to let you assemble first. We got one. Come on in. Oh, look at that trophy. That's pretty big. All right, we're going to give the proclamation to your coach. We'll take some pictures, so best cheer smiles.
Smile, girls. Smile, sparkle, shine, right?
Can I borrow that for council meetings?
Yeah. It works. Okay, I get copies of all of us.
All right, hold on, round of applause. Good job, congratulations. Coach, want to say a few words over the podium so everyone can hear you? You missed it? Awesome.
I would just like to thank everybody for giving me the honor to coach your girls. They did a phenomenal job, and it is my honor to have coached them. I was hard on them, it was rough, we had a lot of changes, but you know what? They stuck through it, they were there for every practice, they never complained. Parents, I know we had some early mornings, but thank you so much for allowing me to coach your girls. And girls, you did a phenomenal job, and I'm so proud of you. And I hope every single one of you come back next year and we take it again 2 years in a row, state champions. That's all.
Thank you very much, Coach. And girls, I know it took a while to get you in here, but your tour of Asia and then Australia, it was hard to get your schedules coordinated, so thank you so much for being here tonight.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm very proud of you. All right, thank you. It's hard to follow that act, but now we'll get to item 4, which pertains to approval of minutes of council meetings. We have one set of minutes to approve tonight. Those are minutes from our regular meeting on January 20th, 2015. Do I have a motion to approve? So moved. Second. Any questions, comments, changes, or corrections? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Commissioner Newstead?
Aye.
Commissioner Durkin?
Aye.
Commissioner Jose?
Aye.
Commissioner Olson?
Aye.
Commissioner Rankin?
Aye.
Commissioner Barnett?
Aye.
Mayor Tully?
Aye, those minutes are approved. Thank you very much. As mentioned, we're going to move item number 5, council member reports, to later in the agenda, probably after public comments, which is item 12, public comments of the general nature. We'll let the Panther cheerleaders filter out.
Yeah,
No worries. I'm back, no sparkle,
Smile, sparkle, shine.
smile, sparkle, shine. Thank you for being here.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
All right, item 6 on our agenda pertains to public hearings, and we do have a public hearing tonight, so we'll get right into that. This public hearing will please come to order. This public hearing has been called by the Village Council to consider the formation of Special Service Area Number 8, Nelson Meadows Subdivision, and the levying of taxes affecting said area. The Special Service Area is located on the east side of Brookbank Road, north of Jefferson Avenue, and west of Carpenter Street. An accurate map of said territory is on file in the office of the village clerk and is available for public inspection. Notice of this hearing was published in the Downers Grove Suburban Life on January 14th, 2015, and a certificate publication is made part of these proceedings. I would like to summarize the procedures which we will follow for tonight's public hearing. First, Dave Fieldman, our village manager, will provide an overview of the proposed special service area. Next, there will be an opportunity for members of the village council to ask questions or make comments. Third, there will be an opportunity for members of the public to make statements or comments or to submit written statements or comments for the record. Fourth, I will then ask, once again, if any member of the village council wishes to make a statement or ask a question. And thereafter, finally, I will ask for a motion to adjourn the public hearing. Please note that at this hearing, witnesses will not be sworn, and a verbatim written transcript of the statements or testimony given at the hearing will not be prepared. However, a recording of the proceedings will be made on village equipment and retained until minutes of the hearing have been prepared and approved by the village council. So with that, Mr. Fieldman, our village manager, I would ask you to please provide an overview of the proposed special service area.
It will be brief because this is the 6th one we've done in the last couple months. It's the same type of SSA. It is an SSA for Nelson Meadow that would be used only as a safeguard in the event that the homeowners association cannot or does not maintain the subdivision's common areas, including primarily the detention base. We're happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Let's start with any members of the village council. Any members of the village council have any questions or comments on the proposed SSA? Any questions or comments from members of the audience with respect to the proposed SSA number 8? Any last minute questions from members of the village council with respect to the proposed SSA? Hearing none, do I have a motion to adjourn the public hearing?
So moved. Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right, public hearing is adjourned. Thank you. That brings us to item 7 on our agenda, which is our consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
So moved. Second.
Any questions or comments from any members of the audience with respect to any of the items on tonight's consent agenda? Any questions or comments from members of the village council with respect to any of the items on tonight's consent agenda? Hearing none, have a roll call, please.
Commissioner Newstead?
Aye.
Commissioner Durkin?
Aye.
Commissioner Jose?
Aye.
Commissioner Olson?
Aye.
Commissioner Rankin?
Aye.
Commissioner Barnett?
Aye.
Mayor Tully?
Aye. Consent agenda passes unanimously. That brings us to item 8, our active agenda. We have no items on the active agenda tonight. So we'll move right to item 9, our first reading or our workshop agenda, where items are presented for discussion and consideration only. No vote will be taken at this point in time, but they may be brought forward for action at a future date. We have 2 items on tonight's first reading or workshop agenda, items 9A and 9B, and traditionally we ask our village manager once again, either himself or through his fine staff, to present those items for consideration by the public and the council. Mr. Fielden.
I will turn it over to a member of our fine staff, particularly Stan Popovich, our planning manager, who actually has both items on the first reading tonight. Stan.
Good evening, Mr. Popovich.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. The first item tonight that we'll be talking about is the council direction to draft a text amendment regarding electronic message board signs. Because the current sign ordinance exists, electronic message boards are prohibited throughout the village. The proposal is before you is to permit electronic message board signs on properties that are zoned INP2, our campus scale institutional public district. The INP2 zoning district is a new classification that just came out of the new zoning ordinance in June of 2014. The proposed, the request for you to consider the amendment came from District 99 School Board. They're looking to rezone both of their north and south high school campuses to INP2 and install electronic message board signs was their desire. Currently, they have a changeable reader sign at north and then an additional sign at south high school as well. A little bit of history behind this. School District 99 had a similar request in 2008. 2008 was approximately 3 years after the sign ordinance was enacted. The request from 2008 was a special use in the R districts because the schools at that time and currently are zoned residential. Any property with an electronic message sign would have to be greater than 18 acres in size, located on an arterial street. Only one electronic message board sign would be allowed, 50 square feet in size, 6 feet tall. Ultimately, the council denied the request for a proposed text amendment. So they're in front of you again tonight to request the council direct staff to prepare a text amendment. At this point, staff hasn't prepared any text amendment because we're looking for direction from council before we move forward. In order to, the request is to go to an INP2 zoning district. Currently, only the Good Sam campus is zoned INP2. That happened a few months ago. There was a process to go through that with the Plan Commission, then ultimately through the Village Council to grant approval for the rezoning of that property. Other potential INP2 zoning district properties include school district properties. Generally, the INP2 district has to be more than 4 acres in size, so a small church on an acre or two would not qualify as an INP2 zoning district. They could go INP1, which is a neighborhood scale institutional public zoning district. Park district, forest preserve districts could be INP2 districts, Midwestern University, and potentially village properties, depending on the size of the property and the uses of those properties as well. But as it currently sits, only Good Samaritan Hospital is zoned INP2, along with the village's water tank, which is right up there as well. In order to sort of assess where we are with the sign ordinance, I've put in the table that was in the manager's memo here. We're currently at 97% compliance. You see we have the second line is we have a lot of sign permits that have been approved. Due to the winter months, we're waiting on some landscaping to be installed. So we've got about, adding in the 49 signs that have to be installed, we're at 99% compliance, but right now, out there, it's 97% compliance. So if council were to direct staff to examine the preparation of a text amendment to allow electronic message board signs in the village, staff would review current practices throughout Illinois and throughout the country. Electronic message boards are continually changing, so the research from even a couple years ago, sometimes things change in terms of light intensity, duration of message. There's more and more studies out there that we can review. Staff would draft a text amendment, then the next step would be go to Plan Commission for public hearing, and then ultimately come up to Village Council for their consideration. So that would be the next steps if you would direct staff to examine a text amendment in this, for this electronic message board signs. If you have any questions right now, I'd be happy to answer those for you.
Thank you. I appreciate the presentation. Let's first start with if any members of the audience have any questions or comments on this request before we open it up for council questions or comments.
Mayor Tully, we have a brief presentation. Why don't we present that?
Dr. McDonald, thank you for being here. Dr. McDonald, Superintendent of District 99. I will leave it up to you whether you would like to make that presentation now, before council questions or comments, or afterwards, entirely up to you. If you prefer to do it now, that would be perfectly fine.
Perhaps it'd be better to do it now.
So be it, please.
Mr. Mayor, Village Council, Village staff, my name is Mark McDonald, I'm the Superintendent of District 99, and I'm here on behalf of the Board of Education in the district. We very much appreciate the opportunity to make this presentation tonight. As you know, we are seeking a text amendment to install digital content signage on our campus. District 99 has had an interest in digital content signage for almost a decade, and we do understand the prohibitions regarding such signage in the village. However, we believe our schools have unique and compelling communications reasons that are perhaps different than any other entity in our community. And while our communications strategies have changed dramatically over the last decade, it is still amazing to me how many people rely on our sign at North for information about North, and how many people lament that we have not yet installed the sign itself that was lost in the 2011 tornado. As was indicated earlier by village staff, this is not our first time making the request for digital signage. The first was during the 2007-2008 school year. That was ultimately denied. In the interim, we've made several entrees informally to the village staff, discussed the issue. And then last year, at the urging of staff, we initiated a change in zoning to INP2, which would enable us to be a very small group of entities in the village of Downers Grove that had a different zoning. So it's under that premise tonight that we're returning and making a request for a text amendment to install the digital signage. I'm joined tonight by two colleagues, Jim Colleget, who is the district's Director of Physical Plant, and Joe Browning, who is the district's Director of Communications, and we will review a few slides for you. Mr. Colleget?
Good evening.
Good evening.
And Stan, thanks, you pretty much hit on these topics, but where we are currently, we're submitting an application, and I want to thank Enza, Dave, and Stan for their help in the process. They've answered a lot of questions. We're a couple of weeks away for submitting the full application. Why we're here tonight? Proposing a text amendment for the INP2 designated institutions. District 99 certainly happy to hear that Good Sam has been approved recently. I'm going to play tag team with Jill. She's going to take the next couple, and I'll be right back with more.
Well, I believe, thank you for letting us speak tonight, and I believe that everyone in the community can agree that kids are a tremendous source of pride for all of us. I mean, just seeing the Panther cheerleaders here today is fun to see. Just yesterday, I posted to our website the 21 kids from North and South, both who are all-state musicians. They were just down in Peoria. Two South High students just received the Scholastic American Vision Award, which is a very prestigious award for their artwork. So we just have a never-ending continuous stream of good news that happens from our schools, and I know that all of you are aware of that. We share that news through many ways, through our website, email, social media, and we want to expand that by having a new communications channel through a digital sign. It will not only allow us to grow our connections with our parents and our families, but also everyone who does not have a connection to our schools at all, who drive past our schools. just a better chance to engage with people. And digital signs would allow us to quickly and easily and remotely share this information. The biggest benefit, I think, is through crisis notifications. I mean, we've worked extensively with the police department, preparing our processes and procedures for safety and crisis drills, and it would just be another resource for us in an emergency to have a digital sign. Notifications of drills in progress, so when people see that all the students are out on the street, they would know what was happening. We could easily put that up. Weather-related school closings, we just had one yesterday, we could use that. But it would also be a great resource for other government agencies like the village. Say your garbage was delayed by a day, you could post that easily due to snow. So all these different things, reminders of clearing snow from a fire hydrant. So the possibilities are endless. There's always something that we need to communicate, and Doug knows that firsthand just as well as I do. Digital signs at high schools are quite common. We took a tour of area high schools, about 10 of them, just to survey and to get a sense of what other large high schools do in our area. We looked at LT, Hinsdale schools, the Glenbard schools, Addison Trail. Almost all of these schools use a digital sign. We saw many first-generation signs, which are called monochrome signs, which are red or that amber color. And what we think are the best examples of digital signs come from Hinsdale Central, and what we hope to install, Naperville Central also. These are full-color signs that are the latest generation. They're lower to the ground, monument type of signs, and we think in keeping with the Respect Neighborhoods aesthetics. So in talking with officials from Hinsdale schools, they say it's a tremendous resource for their families, for their parents. Everyone loves to see their kids' names up in lights. They have a character counts type of program where they give kudos to the kids through the sign, and say that we have similar types of programs at our schools, and it would just be a great resource for us to have. So we're hopeful that this will be considered by you. Now Jim's going to talk through the specifics.
Okay. The picture to your right is the current sign existing at North High School. Our proposal is to add, keep the base and add the LED sign on top of it. It would be similar in size, 8 feet 6 inches high. That includes the base, and about 10 feet wide. Identical to the sign at North is the sign for South, which there's no sign existing at South Campus right now. So same dimensions, just would be a cement base underneath the grass level. Location at South High School, most ideal, about 30 feet from 63rd Street and 90 feet from Dunham. Some features: it's a Daktronic LED monument sign, full color display, 38 square feet both sides. Best practices, some of the things we looked into: static text and images, no animation or scrolling, automatic dimming or display at night. What's unique about these signs is they have these built-in sensors that sense the light and dim and bright accordingly. Message on the screen staying on for at least 12 seconds and then completely disappearing before a new message appears. On behalf of District 99 and Board of Education, some are here tonight in the audience, we thank you for your consideration, and we certainly would answer any questions if you have any.
Thank you for the supplemental presentation, and I did want to recognize the members of the District 99 Board of Education that are here tonight. For members of that board are here, thank you for being here. Always good to see you, as well as Dr. McDonald and your staff. Before I open it up for questions or comments from the Village Council, I will continue to see if there are any questions or comments from members of the public on what's been presented so far.
Good evening, Mayor Tully, Council, staff. I'm Gordon Goodman. I live at 5834 Meadow. And Yes, I have a couple comments about this proposal, but I also had a question on your agenda. I had expected to make a couple comments about items that are not on the agenda tonight, but unlike other meeting agendas for the council, there doesn't seem to be a provision for that tonight.
Item 12, we just moved it in.
I wasn't here at the time. I just-
Oh, yeah, it's both, we moved both council member reports, item 5, and what was public comments of the general nature is now number 12. They'll be considered roughly together at that point in the evening.
Okay, thank you.
Partly, I'm to blame because I have a business trip I need to leave for tonight, so I wanted to make sure we got through some things tonight, and then we'll bring that back at the end.
Returning to the agenda, I think this is a very sensible thing for the village to be considering, and an updating of your zoning ordinance that's well overdue. One or two questions that came up in my mind, since this is just apparently permission for the staff and the Plan Commission to review an ordinance whose text we don't know, I suppose that the text of the amendment would be crafted in light of the experience with District 99's exploration. The conditions that District 99 displayed as best practices sounded as though they would be ideal to introduce as conditions for digital signs in Downers Grove. And I think that they would safeguard the public interest very well. A second comment and question is, it was mentioned that there is an ongoing preparation of an application for institutional zoning, the second type for District 99, and that as part of that, there would be an application or locations for digital signs as described by the district staff. And that Good Samaritan Hospital already has its institutional zoning, but as I recall, when that went through, there were no digital signs located in the master plan that you approved. So my question is, if this text amendment permits digital signs in these institutional zoning districts, and Good Samaritan Hospital decides that it would also like to have a digital sign on its campus and qualifies under the ordinance, would that be a staff decision about allowing the location of the digital sign, or would that be part of the council's prerogative to review the possible siting of a digital sign as an extension of the IP of the institutional zoning for the hospital? More generally, would that, in your judgment, be something that you would like to see be a staff function, or is that sensitive enough that you want that reviewed? The location of potential digital signs always reviewed at the council level. Thank you.
Thank you. I think the answer real quickly is we're at this point just talking about whether or not to explore an ordinance that may or may not touch upon those points if we go down that path. So I guess the answer is remains to be seen. Any other questions or comments from members of the audience on this item? All right, hearing that just very quickly, because in 2007, I remember this came before the council. I was one of the members of the council at that point in time that was against the request that was made by District 99 for a digital sign under the rule as it existed at that point. I have to say that I think there are some things that was then and this is now. Things have changed. And principally in my mind, while I think I've struggled with the digital sign concept, technology has changed, things have changed for the better, I would offer. But most importantly is the new category of the INP2 zoning. That didn't exist back in 2007. at least for myself, there was a concern that allowing it in one place would open up widespread use in other contexts, and some of the unique public benefits that have been described by District 99 staff would be then allowed into other areas where there wouldn't be a unique benefit, and we'd find them spread out throughout business sectors. Without necessarily answering what the question would be, I would support examining preparation of an ordinance to see what that might be, because in my view, the existence of the INP zoning district now, which would be part and parcel of this if we go forward, any sign ordinance would be limited to the INP, as I understand it, has a rather narrow application in unique properties, and I think the kind that serve that unique public benefit that I think is a positive thing that we would like to have as a community, without having all the unintended consequences or even intended consequences if it were to spill into other zoning districts. To me, that's a big distinction from today versus 2007. But at this point, I'll just stop and say, at least from my perspective, I would be in favor of seeing what an ordinance might look like, understanding that some of the issues that have been raised, and I suspect will be raised, can be addressed at that point in time. So with that, I'll ask if my other colleagues have comments or thoughts about where to go. Commissioner Olson.
Mayor, thanks for those comments. I wasn't around during that previous decision, but, and I am somewhat skeptical of the idea of digital signs anywhere in the village. However, I think I would support moving forward with crafting an ordinance. I think that it is important that we go through a public process, and which includes planning, public hearing at the Plan Commission, to really support, to understand better the needs of the public, their thoughts, and have all the information before we make the decision. You know, I have been concerned about digital signs in the past and retain a lot of those concerns, but I think that we owe it to our stakeholders in the community to go through this process and really better understand what it is that they're requesting, the magnitude of this change. So I would support going forward with the process.
Thank you, Commissioner. Other thoughts, comments? Commissioner Jose?
Thank you, Mayor. I'd just like to ask a question for clarification to begin with. The presentation referenced District 99 properties in addition to District 58, Park District, Forest Preserve, et cetera. But the District 99 presentation, and perhaps it was truncated just for space, but seemed to say only District 99, Good Samaritan, and Midwestern University, if memory serves. And I just wanted to clarify that so we're all singing out of the same songbook here.
The information provided by staff is the most correct. The list provided by District 99 includes most of the properties and probably the most likely that would come forward. The comprehensive list is the one provided by Mr. Popovich.
Great. Well, I guess since I've already got the floor, I do appreciate the desire for the digital signage, but in my mind, while the IMP 2 zoning district is new, the location of the potential signs is not. And I'm not sure that that much has changed since 2008. I wasn't up here, but I do agree with that particular decision. I think we're looking at not just 2 signs, but we're looking at the possibility of Good Samaritan, Midwestern University. Okay, those are on larger roads, but we're looking at also potentially all 13 District 58 schools, many of which are in neighborhoods. South High is adjacent to residential properties. And if we're not interested, or at least haven't been at this point, in putting digital signs on, say, Ogden Avenue or 75th Street, I'm not sure why we would consider putting digital signs in residential neighborhoods. Those seem to me to be the most ripe for protection. I understand that there are opportunities and desires to communicate in different ways, but I think in this day and age, with technological advancements being what they are, we have myriad ways to communicate. And the sign just doesn't have the same impact in my mind. All that said, I In terms of the rezoning, I'm fine with it. In terms of the location of the South High sign, I'm fine with that. But as far as the digital sign, I can't support it at this time. And I'm not sure that there's anything out there that would change my mind in terms of the technology of the sign or any advancements that may come with that. So I appreciate the mayor's comments, Commissioner Olson's comments, but I would go in the other direction. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner. Just to be clear, then, you would not support exploration or examine preparation of a, bless you, of a digital sign ordinance for consideration.
That's correct.
Other questions, comments? Commissioner Rankin?
Thank you, Mayor. I think Commissioner Jose put it very well. I think we need to be very sensitive to how this could impact the residential neighborhoods in our community. While I understand that the District 99 wants to communicate better with its students, and I can understand that, but I also think we need to carefully consider how this could impact residential properties in our town. We had a sign ordinance committee years ago that they were tasked to consider community desires and decided to prohibit electronic copy signs. They were a dedicated group of volunteers from our community that met every week for 18 weeks, and they determined that LED lights were obtrusive and highly distracting. I don't know if the community's desires have changed. I understand that the signs have changed, but I don't know if the community is interested in having electronic signs on our streets. So I agree with Commissioner Jose that I wouldn't like to pursue this any further, since I don't think my opinion is going to change. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Euston.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you all for coming tonight to listen to our comments as we listen to yours. The partnership between District 99 and I almost said 58. The partnership between all of the municipalities in Downers Grove is great, including District 58. But brings up a good point my colleagues have made about the INP district. They're all in residential zones right now. District 99's facilities are, all of District 58's are, Good Sam. They're all adjacent, if not across the street, right next door to homes, residents. Somebody's front room could be looking out at a sign. 2008 and now, certainly the technology has changed. I think we've already heard from District 99 representatives that the signs are much more sophisticated with dimmable light emissions, but some would say it's still light pollution. I think we all agree, everybody, all the municipal partners, that communication is vital to our constituents and our residents, our students, our parents, our entire community. I'm just not sure that an electronic sign is the most beneficial way to communicate with folks driving by North High and South High, especially South High at 63rd Street. It's a pretty quick moving road up there. I do agree with Ms. Browning that everybody likes to see their name in lights, and I do think that I've seen a number of pictures of students and family members around the North High sign, and it's too bad that the South High sign hasn't been up there, but it is something that still could happen with the existing sign. Therefore, I think the INP change in zoning, the INP 2 change, would be sensible for District 99 for both campuses, so we could work with them to allow Downers Grove North's existing sign to stay where it is and still be used as a copy change sign, just not electronic. Someone said, I said technology has changed between 2008 and now, 2015, but the most important thing that hasn't changed is the location of the schools, right in the middle of residential neighborhoods. I think if you look at some of the other schools that are out there, Naperville Central, Hinsdale Central, even Lyle High, they're not all the same, they're not all in the same spots. I use Lyle as an example. That's kind of in an industrial park down in a floodplain down there. There's not a lot of residences that abut that area. I'm not as familiar with Naperville Central as I am probably with Hinsdale Central. We might hear about that from our resident Hinsdale expert down here to my left. But I think that's there are homes right across the street from that high school as well. So my position is that, the exploration kind of has been done. We've seen some images that are up here from the district of what the sign may look like, where it would go. I still think that the same decision I made in 2008 applies here, that the electronic signs are in residential neighborhoods, and we have prohibited them in our sign ordinance. All along, we've supported the sign ordinance. I've supported the sign ordinance for our businesses, our commercial uses, as Commissioner Jose has said, along Ogden, 63rd, 75th Street, Butterfield. We haven't allowed any of those uses on those corridors. So to infiltrate into a residential neighborhood with an electronic sign, I don't feel is appropriate. And at this time, I will be not interested in forwarding any of our staff time to look at this text amendment. I do appreciate the information, all the work and meetings and conversations that have gone on for a number of months on this topic. But it's just houses right across the street from a school with an electronic sign. I don't think that's an appropriate use for electronic sign. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Director, Commissioner Barnett, anything you want to add?
Sure. I was looking back at minutes from 2008, and there were a couple of things that grabbed me there in particular. One was at the sign committee, which we've all referred to with a lot of appreciation. They noted that the ban that we're talking about here should be re-reviewed in 5 years to account for specifically new technology. But then they also said specifically electronic message centers are unsightly and cause safety hazards, distracting motorists and pedestrians. So here we are trying to weigh those two things against each other again. My colleagues' comments about, in particular, District 58 properties are moving to me, because as the IMP is currently defined, IMP 2 4-acre is currently defined, if this were tagged together, IMP 2 with this sign change, it would mean all those schools, which clearly are not on 63rd Street, would have some of the things that we've seen up there. And that, to me, is not something I think is in keeping with the intentions of the sign ordinance. That said, and I'm going to, the folks that know what they're talking about in technology are going to laugh at me undoubtedly. But the goal, I think, as I read through the minutes of developing both the ordinance and then the review in 08, was to talk about brightness, talk about distractions, talk about things being unsightly. I guess I'm wondering whether that really has to be the case. No offense to District 99, the stuff I saw, the Hinsdale Central sign Jeff talks about, I personally strike me as exactly that: loud, bright, unsightly, and distracting. But when you look around Daktronics site and competitor sites, that's not their only technology. And so, fortunately, there's no Daktronics guy in the room, I hope. But if you had like a Kindle, for example, to me, something like that might be a way to meet the needs that District 99 feels it has while still preserving the intentions of the ordinance. I don't know if such a thing exists. And so all this is a long way of saying I do not want to direct our staff time and energy to write an ordinance in keeping with the presentation from District 99 tonight. But I would say our staff should continue to work with District 99 to find out if there are other technologies available that might be more in keeping with the ordinance. Street furniture, I think, is one that I was looking at over the weekend. It seemed to have a slightly different style and structure. The idea that it not be LED/bright light emitting, and I shouldn't use the word LED because it's a specific technology, but if you think about Hinsdale Central sign versus a television, or Hinsdale Central sign versus a Kindle, we're talking about two very dramatically different effects on the immediate environment. And so it's kind of a long-winded non-answer, I suppose, to the question. But the IMP2 thing obviously makes sense. I do not think that we can join IMP2 with that sign request change per District 99's request tonight in good conscience relative to the other applications throughout the community. I don't know that that necessarily needs to be the end of the conversation about electronic changeable copy signs for District 99. So Dave's looking at me like I've lost my mind. I just don't know that this has to be the end of the conversation. I cannot support LED signs as described tonight applicable in all of the IMP2 possible locations throughout town. It's not to say that on Main Street and 63rd Street there isn't some electronic copy possibility that wouldn't be so offensive.
Thanks, Commissioner.
Commissioner Durkin, you want to add anything?
Yeah, sure. I appreciate the opportunity. Normally, I don't talk about the history of my previous life, but this occurred when I was an alderman in Darien, when Hinsdale South wanted an electrical sign, which they have today, so I was really hoping you would have shown that sign instead of Central. But that was actually something that our council was against. We were not interested in allowing any sort of sign that is there today. And it's there today. And all the stuff I heard back then was causing accidents, it was bright, it was this or that. To my knowledge, the sign hasn't caused anything. What makes this request a little different than the fears that we have collectively, based on what I've heard, is that we're going to be polluted with LED signs all up and down the business district. I don't support the LED signs throughout the community at all. What I do support, and I am willing to entertain and look at, is the development for electronic sign, changeable sign for the school districts, because I feel as taxing bodies, you guys could possibly be exempt from the ordinance itself. So instead of going through the legal challenge, I think we owe it to the community to at least look at it and see if it's the right thing for the community itself. I know you've come before us in 2008. I was trying to figure out where I voted, and shame on me for not finding out where I was back then. But today, my position is I don't have a problem with your request and would encourage staff to move forward. The only issues or only things that I would want our village to have is to have ultimate control over the messaging in case there is an emergency and we need to get a message out, which I know in your presentation you had said that that would be done. And then I'm just concerned about the brightness. But as long as the technology is there that you're saying is there, that it will dim at night and brighten during the day and however else those things work, I'm all for it. And I think if it's done right, it can be done in the best taste and it'll be an asset to the community.
Thank you, Commissioner. And if my colleagues will excuse me, because as mentioned earlier, I need to leave at 8 o'clock to catch a flight. My apologies. And then Commissioner Newstaff will step in and handle the rest of the meeting. So let me just share this. Since by my mark, we have 3 who are interested in going forward exploring something, 3 who don't want to explore anything. Commissioner Barnett, I'm not quite sure where you landed, so I kind of let you on the side. But so let me throw this out. Not that I'm going to change anybody's mind, but in terms of exploring, which is really what we're talking about at this point, not voting on the sign that was up on the screen. And I understand and respect the comments of my colleagues, but something Commissioner Rankin said and something Commissioner Barnett said led me to share this with you. One, I think you asked a rhetorical question, Commissioner Rankin. We don't know if the community is interested in these types of signs. And sure enough, if you go back to the May 2005 sign ordinance, we know what that says, we know what was said at that point in time. Well, it's nearly been 10 years. And do we know what the community is thinking on this subject? We've seen over the span of a decade the community's view on lots of things change. And as part of that public inclusion process, which I'm not the only one who's mentioned it, do we have the conversation by exploring the ordinance to find out what the community thinks about it? And let me add this to that. There's not just one opportunity for public comment here, whether it's District 99 or District 58 or whoever it is. There's the public hearings that we have as to whether or not to change the sign. But then on that same note, there's public input and opportunities and hearings at the District 99 level. So there are 2 opportunities for the constituents of our community to weigh in on this. And one big reason why I'm in favor of at least exploring it is precisely because we can get an opportunity to hear what the community thinks, both through our own proceedings, but also through District 99's proceedings. And if it's a District 58 issue, and the community is outraged at the idea that there would be electronic signs in the neighborhoods, I'm sure District 58 will hear it just like us. So I'm just suggesting that that would be another thing to consider in terms of at least exploring it. The second point that Commissioner Barnett was wrestling with is, well, okay, I don't like what I saw on the screen, but I don't want to foreclose the conversation. There might be something else out there that would be okay. Here again, I think that actually argues in favor of exploring what an ordinance might look like, because maybe there is something that Commissioner Barnett, through his research, has identified that District 99 or whomever might also find to be appropriate, and factor that into the community conversation, and then maybe we do get to what are we famous for here in Downers Grove? It's not either or, it's and solutions. Maybe there is an and solution here, and I just wouldn't want to foreclose the conversation, the public conversation, that might lead to an and solution. So we're kind of at a point here where we've got 3 for, 3 against, and 1 doesn't want to foreclose the conversation. So I throw that out, so maybe we can break the stalemate.
I agree with almost everything you said, Mayor. The problem I think that I have is that what was asked of us specifically was not, should we or should we not foreclose the conversation? It was asked, well, should we direct staff to create an ordinance in keeping with the request from District 99? That's the part that I struggle with, because I don't think, as presented tonight, is something that I could support, so I hate to dedicate the time to it. I agree with you, that doesn't mean foreclose the conversation. So I'll leave you to interpret that if you'd like further, but the agenda item that we've been asked to consider tonight was that specific direction, and so it's on that front that I wouldn't want to support doing that. But I don't want to foreclose the conversation. I think that would be kind of nuts. It's been a decade since we looked at the technology associated here, and it's not an unreasonable request that we consider it again.
Fair enough. And the other thing that we found out with signs recently, gateway signs, for example, is that everybody has an opinion as to what a handsome sign looks like.
Or 5.
And, yeah, or 6 or 7 or 8, because everyone is qualified upon exiting the womb to give an opinion as to whether they like what a sign looks like. We found that out with our own gateway signs, so this is a little bit of that as well. The only reason I'm extenuating this conversation at my own risk is because I just want to give staff some direction, and I think we heard clear direction. I agree, let's not foreclose the conversation, but what does that mean for staff?
If I can interject, the good news is...
Please, thank you.
This is actually a motion, so it'll appear next week on the active agenda for an actual vote.
So we can figure that out.
That's correct.
Good man. All right.
Mayor, if I could interject.
Absolutely.
At some point in the not-too-distant past, we had talked about the possibility of other changes to the sign ordinance and decided to take a more comprehensive look at it sometime in the future, probably under the guise of a high-priority action item in the next long-range planning session. In the event that this doesn't move forward next week with whatever the vote is, in keeping with Commissioner Barnett's desire to continue the conversation, I think we could put it on the agenda for something to consider in that long-range planning initiative.
Well, I certainly agree with that in the instance that this doesn't go forward next week. I would support that.
Just something else to
the
throw.
same reasons I support exploring it or examining it now. But, well, I guess the answer is we have a vote next week.
That's why we got Fieldman here.
That's why we get paid the big bucks.
I don't vote, though, so we'll just put it on the agenda for you.
All right. Anything else before Dr. Goodman, something brief?
Yes, exactly.
Only because I don't want to get up and walk out in the middle of your comment.
Right. I just wanted to interject that perhaps you want to make this, rather than a permitted use in the district, special use. And then it would come back to you, and you would be able to look at individual sites and individual displays and satisfy these feelings that you have of what the community wants on a fine-tooth basis rather than in a more general way in which you treat zoning. So special use, I want to ask you to think about as a component in this discussion. Thank you.
I appreciate that. I think that in theory that works better than in practice because of when you start getting into content restrictions on signs, you get into a First Amendment issue, and unfortunately that's where zoning and the First Amendment don't mix very well. But that would work well in practice. I mean, it would work well in theory, but not in practice, unfortunately.
Not to mention recent experience with special uses.
Not to mention that. Okay, very well. Then I think that's the end of the discussion on that item. I'm going to apologize to everyone. I do need to leave to catch a flight. Mayor Pro Tem Newstead will take over, so this is probably a good point for me to excuse myself. Thank you. I appreciate your flexibility. Sorry about this, but it is what it is. So we'll go over to the next item.
Thank you. Item B on the first reading agenda is a discussion of the Historic Preservation Ordinance. This was introduced by council a couple of weeks ago. And here to present information on this item, again, is Stan Popovich.
Thank you, Manager Phelan, council members, Mayor Pro Tem. The item tonight, scroll through, is a discussion of the Historic Preservation Ordinance, which is Chapter 12 of the Municipal Code. We've broken this up, as we discussed in the past, in a couple of different locations. Tonight, we're going to discuss how we create historic districts, historic landmarks. In March, we'll come back and we'll talk about how we regulate the historic preservation ordinance. Tonight, we're looking for a desired outcome as a list of potential amendments to the historic preservation ordinance, what council would like us to potentially look at within the historic preservation ordinance. A little background, the existing ordinance was adopted in June of 2007. There are 5 purposes of the ordinance that are identified in the green sheet that you have provided and also online. There's 3 components to the historic preservation ordinance: how to designate a landmark, how to designate a district, and then certificates of appropriateness. Again, tonight we'll talk about the landmark and district, and we'll talk about the certificates of appropriateness in March. The slide here shows how the process to create a historic district is where we'll start. There's 5 general steps that we go through: an application, a preliminary hearing at the Architectural Design Review Board, issuance of preliminary findings, a second public hearing at the ADRB, and then ultimately council consideration. So we'll go through each of those steps that are outlined in the report as well. The first step is the application. Staff has an application packet that we hand out similar to any Plan Commissioner or Zoning Board of Appeals application that we have. Any party can apply. There's no restriction on an application for a historic district. The requirements are, with the applications, names and addresses of all parties that are applying, and all property owners as well, and the addresses of all the properties within the proposed district. In order to apply, you have to have consent from 51% of the property owners that are part of the district. So if it's a 4-property district, it would have to have 3 property owners would have to consent. A written description and a building survey is required, as well as photographs and a district map with clear and distinct boundaries. So that would be the first step, would be an application to staff. Staff would review the application, make sure it would meet our 51% before we would move forward with a preliminary hearing. Staff would develop a staff report and move to a preliminary hearing at the Architectural Design Review Board. We would publish the notification in the newspaper, like we always do, and then also mail out notices to the property owners within the historic district and also the property owners within 250 feet of the historic district, of the proposed historic district. And like I mentioned, publish in the newspaper as well. At the hearing, the Architectural Design Review Board would consider making a preliminary determination of qualification for a historic district. They would use the district criteria in section 12.600, which are listed here. So in essence, the district has to be 2 or more contiguous properties. There are some communities that have thematic districts, so if we had all Sears homes, you could do a thematic historic district of all the Sears homes. That's something we could potentially explore if that was a direction from council to look at. Additionally, the individual properties within the district don't need to be landmarked. However, as noted in the district, a significant number of properties must meet one of the criteria to be landmarked. Contribute visually, sense of time, clear and distinct boundaries like I mentioned before. So at the ADRB meeting, I would hear testimony from the applicant. The staff would present our report to them, and then also they would hear any public comments, additionally comments from the people within the district as well. And then people that got noticed, or if people just drove by and knew that was going on, they could come and offer comments. The ADRB would then make a preliminary determination. So they would end up saying, preliminary, we think this would qualify as a district, or we don't think this would qualify for a district. We would then, as a staff, send out the preliminary determination via certified mail to all property owners within the district. So every property owner within the proposed district would get notification via certified mail about the preliminary notification. Additionally, they would be informed of the date and time of the public hearing where a formal recommendation will be made by the ADRB. So in this case, if the ADRB met in January and they determined that there was a preliminary determination that the district could move forward and might qualify, we would send a certified mailing out stating that the next meeting before the ADRB to consider this would be, let's just say, for example, the March ADRB meeting, so they'd be notified as that. So they would all know within the district. And then moving forward to the public hearing at the ADRB meeting, we would again notice in the newspaper and again send out notifications to all the property owners within 250 feet of the district and all property owners within the district. Again, at the ADRB would hear testimony again and then use the same criteria of 12.600 and then make a determination and recommendation. That recommendation would then come forward to the village council. which is the final step of creating a historic district. By a simple majority vote, the village council could create the district. If the district was created, it would be recorded with DuPage County Recorder of Deeds. It would be placed on the zoning map as well. Ultimately, the decision would be sent via certified mail to all the property owners within the historic district so that they would be aware that they are now within a historic district. So that's the process to create a historic district that's currently outlined in the Historic Preservation Ordinance. A landmark within the village, it's a three-step process, and we currently have two landmarks in the village, 5256 Carpenter Street and 4943 Highland Avenue. So these two were, 5256 Carpenter was designated in 2008 and Highland Avenue in 2009. The first step here is, as you can see, it's a three-step process. The first step is an application. Any party can apply to designate a home in Downers Grove or a business or a commercial property as a historic landmark in the village. What is required is owner consent before the application moves forward. So if I'm a property owner, I don't have time to nominate my property, but I believe it's a property that should be preserved or landmarked, I can request that my neighbor fill out the paperwork and go through the process. As long as I consent, that neighbor can move the application forward. Generally with the application, again, it's just some paperwork that needs to be filled out, a written description of the home, photographs and a site plan of the house and the property so that we can see what the unique features of the home or the property are. Then it would be a one-step process at the public hearing because it is a single property. We would publish the notification, put a sign out just like we do, notify the property owner of the hearing date, and then again, the neighbors within 250 feet so that they could come to the meeting and talk. And again, if anybody would drive past and see the property, obviously they're welcome at the public hearing as well. The ADRB would look at district criteria, I'm sorry, I'm some misspelling here, landmark criteria in section 12400. So there are 2, 4, 6, 8 items that it could meet that could make it landmark property valued to the historic heritage or cultural characteristics of the village, the nation, of the state, identification with a person. Both of the properties that were landmarked, Carpenter was associated with an individual who was with the Oratory Society in Downers Grove early on, and then the Bungie House, which is in Highland, was the Tivoli Theater individual that started the Tivoli Theater, so that was their designation. The Highland property is also a distinguished Victorian characteristic, so that's how that also qualified. So there's also archaeological resources, and then sort of the catch-all at the end is the source of civic pride. So if it's a prideful thing, that would qualify for a landmark designation as well. And those are listed in section 1240, and I apologize, it should be landmark criteria, not district criteria. The third step, so at the public hearing, the ADRB would make a recommendation whether they believe this would be a landmark property or not. The final step would be council consideration. By a simple majority vote, the village council could grant landmark status to the property. Again, it would be designated on the zoning map and recorded with the DuPage County Recorder of Deeds. The decision would be sent via certified mail to the property owner. The property would then be placed on the landmark status, and then it's on the zoning map, so any permits that would come in, we would know that it's on a landmark status that way. We have reviewed other CLG properties, or CLG governments that have similar ordinances to see where we sort of relate in terms of landmark, whether owner consent is required. You can see four of the 6 don't require owner consent. We do, and Elgin also does. In terms of the district percent of owner consent required nomination, we require 51%. That goes all the way down to 0% for a district. What you do find in some of the other ordinances is where it's easy to nominate a district. It takes maybe 10 or 25%. But in order to designate it, in essence, objectors could file a petition to object, and if 51% of the people within the district object, then the nomination doesn't move forward. So there's a couple different ways that people in different organizations do it as well. And then 4 out of the 6 properties have a process to remove the designation status. That is the same process you would have to go through as to designate. So you'd follow the same steps, whether that was a district or an individual landmark. We've referenced in the manager's memo and the green sheet the comprehensive plan and where some of the historic preservation components are attached, or where they talk about neighborhood character, so that's included in your documentation there. So that shows how that applies in the comprehensive plan, how that's sort of discussed in the comprehensive plan. With some potential modifications that we found, the first thing that we should do is we should reference the comprehensive plan. That is an updated document, historic preservation is woven in, so that's one we think we should add into the ordinance. We believe we should update the public hearing notice requirements. The zoning ordinance updated in terms of we now require, we don't count the public rights of way as within our 250 feet, so we believe we should mingle and really combine the two public hearing notice requirements so that those are very similar and match what we require for a public hearing for special use or planned unit development and what we require for this as well. We could update the application requirements to where the applicant has to be either an owner, a Downers Grove resident, or a authorized representative of the property owner. So that would sort of limit, so somebody from California can't randomly come in and request a designation of a property. We also thought we could revise some of the designation criteria set forth in 12.400 and 12.600. It's a very technical document, so we can maybe make it a little bit easier to understand. We think properties that are already on the National Register, like Avery Coonley, it's a simple thing for us to put them onto landmark status, and it's a great feature that they're on the National Register, but we should also make it a local landmark, maybe make that process a little bit easier, so if they are on the National Register, which has a lot more stricter criteria than local landmarks, that's something we could maybe work with. Landmarks, there's no provision of an age of the landmarks, so a lot of ordinances require a certain age. We had suggested maybe 50 years plus one of the other criteria. A lot of times you won't have archaeological resources, but you'll have historic resources, and it might qualify for an individual person or a distinctive architectural style, but it may not qualify for the other ones. So the suggestion is for 50 years and then one of the other criteria. And also for a district where 50% of the district has to be at least 50 years of age, that might be another criteria that we could add as well. So those are some of staff's potential modifications of the ordinance. We're very interested to learn what council and their ideas are on the ordinance as well. If there's any questions about the process, how to create a district at this time, or create a landmark, I'd be happy to answer those for you.
And just a note, obviously, this is a lot to take in. That's why we are spreading the presentation over 2 council meetings, one tonight and one in March. We would benefit from anybody and everybody's comments tonight from the council and public on this topic. Of course, it's also perfectly acceptable to wait till you hear a little bit more about the regulations and some of our thoughts on that. We'll take comments now and again in March, so anytime anybody feels comfortable, it's not like it's restricted, you can only talk about this topic tonight or only about the regulations in March. It's an ongoing conversation. And with that, we're happy to answer any questions.
Questions or comments from the audience first on this item? Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Commissioners. I've got a few thoughts on...
Give us your name and address.
I'm sorry, Scott Lazar, 808 Maple Avenue. Thanks. I have a few thoughts on the kind of how we create portion, and a couple other thoughts just to sort of to get the juices flowing in terms of the how we manage part. I just want to throw some things out for your consideration. I first want to say nobody's against a voluntary historic district. I'm certainly not. I think they're a good idea. What many of us were against was the way the ordinance was presently written. So this is a fantastic opportunity to talk to you, and I'm very glad that everyone's taking a look at this to figure out ways to make it more attractive. I thought those were terrific recommendations. I like the direction you're headed. I'd like to maybe take one thing one step further. Perhaps we can consider a slight difference on the application requirements. Some of us are still not keen on the idea that any Downers Grove resident can nominate somebody else's property. And so for landmark designation, I'd like you to consider perhaps that only the owner of record or designee of the owner of record can apply for their property or nominate their property. And for a historic district, that should be submitted by a homeowner that resides in the proposed district. It's just a minor modification. The other thing is, in the application process, there's a series of, protocol to pull everything together and present this to the ADRP. One thing that may be helpful is on the owner consent form, an indication that the owner of a record also agrees to the historic status designation for their particular property. So whether it's significant, contributing, or non-contributing, there should be some indication that they are aligned with that classification. And I will tell you, if you want people to really embrace a historic district, it's pretty essential that the minor exterior modifications, painting your yard, landscaping, adjusting your fence, those type of things, those are exempt from the COA, the Certificate of Appropriateness requirements. I'm not talking about major changes, but for minor changes, which right now can be approved by the director, aren't necessarily automatically approved. And they require a fee in addition to whatever permitting. So I will tell you, I tell you that'll be an important thing to consider to make this more attractive broadly. I'd also suggest a change in the process for certificate of appropriateness for more major modifications as well. Presently, proposed modifications require a public hearing. And I certainly agree that designation of a historic district should be open to public debate and hearings. However, once a district is established, shouldn't the homeowner be able to make modifications to their home subject to the approval of the Architectural Review Board? So subjecting them further to a public hearing, I'm not sure is a good idea. Why should every member of the village get to weigh in on an individual homeowner's modifications, assuming they're compliant? Assuming there's no exception being sought by the owner. I believe public hearings on modifications are going to scare a lot of otherwise interested homeowners away from seeking landmark or historic district status. A lot of passion around this. So imagine being an individual up here and having hundreds of folks weigh in on your individual proposal, just put that in perspective. I'd also suggest thinking about a cap on filing fees for certificate of appropriateness submissions. These fees are in addition to normal permits. You want a fee, you don't want a bunch of nuisance applications, but I suggest just putting a cap in, whatever that is. And then there's some kind of broader buckets that in some cases are absent from the ordinance that probably should be considered, and I'll just bring them up at a high level. Consider an exemption for economic hardship. So if someone can't afford to make the changes in order to be compliant, or the cost of abiding by the criteria is materially greater than the cost of using modern methods and modern materials, that some sort of exemption be considered. ADA, Americans with Disabilities Act, there's no carve-out currently in the ordinance for the ADA Act. A loss or substantial loss of a home, fire, flood, or other circumstance. We don't address what a homeowner has to abide to in fixing, repairing, or demolishing that home. We don't address demolition at all, and I think that has to be addressed. And a final thing I throw out in terms of sort of a bucket to consider is a section for village obligations. The neighborhood that receive a historic district designation, I think one of the recommendations was, you have signs demarcating the area. I think that's a very good start. Think of something along these lines, okay? And this is just for the sake of example and illustration. The concrete sidewalks in historic districts will be replaced with period-appropriate brick sidewalks within X amount of years of the formation of the historic district, like such as those in front of or some of the ones we pave certain streets with, those type of things. And I don't care whether it's sidewalks or gas lamp lighting or raised planting beds or something. The point is to provide some sort of value or incentive to the homeowners in exchange for the restrictions and improved cost of improvements and the risk to the house values that are associated with a historic district. I think it's important as well because it means the village and the public will also have skin in the game. So if historic districts suddenly required some taxpayer dollars, then I think we're going to get a truer read, a much better read on just how important residents think they are. Right now, it's real easy. Yes, I'm for a historic district, but when it comes to actually, the trade-offs and investments required, I think we'll get a more accurate read. And if we believe that historic districts are important to the entire village and that they provide benefits to all residents, then it stands to reason that we should be willing to invest in them. So just want to throw out a few thoughts for your consideration. I think there is some great progress being made, and there are some also additional areas that have not yet been addressed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lazar. Any other comments or questions?
Mike Davenport, 6636 Blackstone Drive, here in Downers Grove. I serve on the Architectural Design Review Board and have since its inception, so was intimately involved in writing the ordinance that we have right now. I would say that, to Mr. Lazar, some great suggestions. I think that if we dive into the ordinance, you'll find that some of the things that you concerned aren't in there actually are in there. But we could do with some more, maybe some language adjustments to, if somebody is missing something in the review of it, that says to me that maybe there's an update needed. I'd like to point out that we had an ADRB meeting just a week or so ago, and took up some of these ideas. One thing that we talked about was potentially restricting the scope of the review to just things that are visible from the street. So, for instance, Naperville's ordinance right now does that. So, if whatever it is that you're doing, if it's not something that's visible from the street, then it's exempt from the oversight, which I think makes some sense, and that's found in other ordinances. And in fact, the matrix that you saw up there was the result of the work of the people on the Architectural Design Review Board. I had Elgin. So we spent time looking at the different ordinances, and we did find, in fact, that the ordinance that we have right now is substantially aligned with what you see in other municipalities. So we don't have something that's sitting here that's strange or different. It's something that, as an architect, I can tell you, I've dealt with Naperville too. What you see is pretty consistent. So, but there are some tweaks that we could look at doing, and I think make some sense. I think you heard some suggestions tonight, and we discussed some at the ADRB, and we'd be happy. I don't presume to speak for the Architectural Design Review Board, but I do expect that the group would be pleased to spend some more time looking at this for you. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Davenport. Thank you for your service to the ADRB. Any other questions or comments from the audience? Good evening, Dr. Goodman.
Good evening, Mayor Newstead. I'm still Gordon Goodman, and I had a couple comments, mainly to say that this was a very interesting presentation, and I thought particularly the comparison of communities and all of that detail that was given by the staff very useful. I want to point out that actually the staff had offered to Pierce Downers Heritage Alliance that same survey, the PowerPoint that was presented to the Architectural Design Review Board meeting, and contains much of the information that you saw this evening. It's now posted on our website, pdha.org, and I would encourage the village to post that kind of detail of the PowerPoint when we offered to post it, the file that, the original file of the PowerPoint was so large that it wasn't possible for us to post. So I suggested that it would be fine for us to just have a link to that presentation if it was posted on the village's website, but we were told that that's not the policy of the village to post such presentations. Well, I think these things that you see at your council meetings really are very useful for people who haven't been able to come to the council meeting to be able to see on the website. So I want to encourage you to look again at that policy and see if it wouldn't be possible in connection with this ongoing review of the historic preservation ordinance to post the PowerPoint that Mr. Popovich gave at this meeting so that people, as they study this, will be able to review that as well as the staff report that is part of your green sheet. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Goodman. Any further audience questions or comments on this item? Seeing none, any council questions or comments? Commissioner Rankin.
Stan, would you mind, I didn't see it, but you did indicate that there is a way to repeal if you're a historic landmark. Can you just detail that process, how that works? I'm sorry.
So if you wanted to repeal the application for a landmark, you would go through the same process. You would apply. We would need a description of why you want to repeal the landmark status. So if, for instance, if there was a fire or something and the building was destroyed, you could apply for it, explain there was a fire, the building was destroyed, it no longer stands, or it's so far damaged that you can't repair. You'd go through a public hearing process at the ADRB. There'd be a determination of why to repeal the landmark status. Ultimately, it would come back up to village council, and then the council could repeal the status. In case of a fire or significant damage, that's probably easier to repeal. In the case of, I bought my house, it's a landmark status, nothing has changed on it, the standards probably wouldn't be met to have that repealed. Then it would be harder to repeal if there was no significant change to the property, that nothing really has changed, I guess I would say.
So what's the timeline that repealing process would happen? I mean, I'm picturing if you have a fire, you want to get back to home, and then you have to, let's say you decide you don't want to bring it back to what it was.
Mm-hmm.
You know, what's that timeline? Is it 3 months, 4 months?
It's probably 2 to 3 months at a minimum, just because we'd have to go to public hearing before the ADRB, we have notification requirements, and then ultimately getting up to village council. We would, in the case of a act of God or a big fire or a tornado, we obviously would work with the property owner to get them through the process as quickly as possible. But we would still have to follow through on meeting our publication notifications requirements. Now, in some ordinances that we examined, there are certain things with act of God that you can have a director or village manager issue a certificate of appropriateness to demolish if there's a safety hazard or some condition that's hazardous. There can be something, in essence, over the counter that gives you that, with the understanding that you have to come back at a future time to get the actual paperwork or how that works. So we're exploring that option as well.
Okay. I think that's my only question. I have a few comments. Or did we want to allow others for questions and then?
Go ahead and keep going if that's all right with you.
Okay. So I do think that you should be a property owner in the district to submit to create a district. I would support that change. I would also support certain property owners opting out if they don't want to participate in being part of a historic district. There's some of the description seems like it's vague. Like, for example, it says, under the criteria for a historic district, it says a significant concentration of structures meeting any of the criteria for a landmark. It seems like we should have numbers to that, significant. That seems vague to me. I'd like more information about a thematic historic district. That's interesting. And the same with the historic landmark. Although you need owner consent, I kind of worry that the owner should be doing the application. I could see a very enthusiastic neighbor doing all the work for their neighbor and just saying, I'd like you to just sign this and consent to it, and the person not quite knowing what they were getting into. And I liked Mr. Lazar's suggestion where someone could ask for an exemption due to financial reasons. I think that that's an interesting concept to explore. So I think that was all. Thank you.
Commissioner O'Day?
Thank you. I don't know about the idea of letting folks opt out. I guess I'd be willing to consider that. The thought that I had in terms of the district would be if there's a home in it that's not contributing, it's not particularly historic, that they could be exempted from it, and then maybe along with that, have some sort of incentive program built in, and you'll hear this word from me a couple more times, incentive, to perhaps redevelop if there's another owner down the road, and by that I mean in the future, that might be interested in building something that is more in tune with the historic nature of whatever the district might be. I do like the idea of a historic district being started by somebody from within the historic district. I think this is something that should be an organic process, should come from the neighborhood. I also would like to see a historic landmark within the district. I think it makes sense that if you've got a historic district, there's probably a historic landmark or a property that is eligible to be designated as one within that district. And again, that speaks to my desire to have it be an organic process as opposed to something that is imposed from outside. All that said, I think, could we put the slide back up about with the breakdowns of the different ordinances and whatnot? I think the comparison between Downers Grove and Elgin pretty much demonstrates that the problem or the issue isn't necessarily that the landmark has to be owner designated or owner consented, or the district has to have 51% sign off. Elgin's got 10 times as many local landmarks and 4 more districts and more properties within local districts than any of the other municipalities that are surveyed here. The issue seems to be either one of lack of interest or lack of knowledge of the possibility of being designated or creating a district, or perhaps a lack of incentive to do so. And so those are the things that I'd like to look at. How can we get more interest in designating your property or designating your neighborhood as a historic district? And what can we do to incentivize people to move down that path? We have a great history here in Downers Grove, and we have just absolutely tremendous resource here in the Historic Preservation Ordinance, and I'd like to see more people taking advantage of it. I do so myself, but I don't think a 1953 Cape Cod counts. So I hope that we can increase the awareness of the ordinance and get out there and maybe increase the number of landmarks and start up a district. Thanks.
Mr. Olson?
Thanks. I think the comment that was made by Commissioner Jose regarding the properties that are not significant or contributing in the district having some sort of less restriction, that's something that I think we could explore. I like the staff recommendations. I like what Mr. Davenport presented as some of the ideas that would discuss the ADRB, and would be open to that. I think the main concerns I have, I'm going to save to next month, because I think it really has to do with some of what Mr. Lazar presented tonight regarding the certificates of appropriateness, the process, the fees, those issues, which I think are more concerning and more restrictive, perhaps, than it needs to be. So look forward to that discussion. But I really, I do support and I like the direction that staff has taken in their recommendations on this portion.
Thanks, Jeff. I have just kind of gone through this process, which gives me at least a slightly unique perspective. And as I reflect on both that process as well as that kind of information up there, I guess I have to agree with Greg. Something about what we're doing isn't getting the desired result. I think everybody in town probably, I'm not proposing a referendum question here, but I suspect that everybody in town generally is of the impression that it would be best if we were protecting some of our historic properties. Yet for some reason, in 7 years, we haven't. And so when Greg talks about incentives, I think maybe there's a tool there. And my general kind of reflection on this is that I think we ought to make it harder, which is a pretty broad brush term, but harder to create districts. Because I worry quite a bit about the impact they can have on owners within the districts who don't want to participate. It's a pretty tough pill to swallow right now, as it stands. Yet at the same time, I think I want to do something about the landmark designation that once there would be more appealing to people. I think there's things about that scare folks off. In fact, we've got 2 homes that have voluntarily chosen to landmark themselves in 7 years. Something about it is not appealing, because certainly we've got a ton of historic properties and a ton of people who really care about their historic properties and have chosen them on purpose and maintained them on purpose. So I've got some comments that I'll kind of hold till next discussion because they speak to the landmark designation portion, the voluntary aspect of it. But as it relates to the process of a district, I would, some additional changes I'd like to see. I'd like to see some sort of a higher threshold than that 51%. I've seen, other ordinances, I can't cite them, find them if you want, that have 2/3. In my mind, that ought to be quite a bit higher than 51%. If you got a couple of blocks and 20 homes and all of a sudden 11 people decide they want to be a district, there's 9 of them that are kind of left hanging. And I don't think that's okay. I also don't think that's the goal. The goal is to get these districts and these landmark properties assigned, not create neighborhoods that are wrestling with each other. And then there's also some form questions that I have. Right now, we have sort of an open-ended, what does it take to sign off on consent? And I'd like us to have that a little more defined. Specifically, this is relating to the existing ordinance, so if it changes, obviously these would have to change, but I'd like to see owners that have to sign off. If they sign off on the historic district. They also specifically sign off on some of the 12.7 criteria elements. Now, whether we exempt some of that or not, I guess could change that, but as it stands today, if we're going to ask folks, knock on their door and ask folks if they want to participate, there's a lot to that. There's a lot of burden in the existing ordinance, and I think it's important that people really say to this body and to the ADRB, yeah, I get it. I understand what that means beyond just liking the word historic. I do have some spot in my mind and in my heart for the idea that people could still opt out. If we could get districts going, that would be great. Perhaps that's not necessary if there are other changes like financial exemptions and things like that. But as the rest of the ordinance stands today, I think there's a real risk there to people. 51% and you can't get out, and you might not have a historic district, and you might not have the financial means. That's tough. So I want people to make districts. I want people to landmark designate their homes. I just don't want it by force. So I've got quite a bit more really that's on the second portion, which I'll save until next week. And then I also do want to talk about the incentives. I'll leave that till then also because it kind of affects the specific property owners and how we might entice them or make it advantageous. The comment from Mr. Lazar about the village's sort of skin in the game is in the same kind of thinking. Why would I want to participate in a historic district? Right now, only because I like the idea of historic houses and want to say I'm protecting them, because frankly, it's a huge burden. I get nothing extra from the village, it's a big burden on me, limits what I can do with my home, there's a whole bunch of downsides to it, and kind of no upside other than being able to say I contributed to historic preservation. Clearly, that's not enough for the folks in Downers Grove. So I think there's quite a bit we can do on the other end of the ordinance. We'll talk some more about that next time. But the idea of village skin in the game and some exemptions and some higher thresholds as well as some incentives, I think is pretty important to this conversation.
Thank you. I'll just add, everything referred I pretty much agree with. One of the things that struck me is that the updating of the application requirements, that the applicant must be an owner and a Downers Grove resident. I think that really speaks to the cleanup of some of the language of the historic preservation ordinance. Having that as step one, you need to live in Downers Grove to create a district or designate a house, I think is pretty important. The conversation about incentives is interesting to me, and I'm glad we brought that up tonight because it gives us some time to consider that going forward and could play better into the conversation of next month. We've heard a lot from folks that are using this, the ADRB, some folks that have been wrapped up in a historic district designation, and things like the certificate of appropriateness requirements, exempting of properties, the ADA provisions. I mean, all those things are very interesting when you start looking at a macro level of what the whole village could look like. As far as the incentive and why we're not seeing them, I wonder if it's because our community is ever-changing. We're 183 years old, and if you look at Pierce Downer's block, and you can see his house, which has had multiple additions, as well as brand-new homes right across the street. I think the house right next door is going to be probably torn down soon. So there are areas in town that are desirable, and sometimes people want a newer house instead of an older historic house. So that could be where we're finding a hard time to find a district, because the actual blocks and areas are not all historic homes. So I would be interested to see how big does the district really need to be. I think it was 2 contiguous properties, maybe. Did I have that right? I'm seeing heads nod. So that's something that, maybe clarification to the community on how big the district really needs to be. I'm looking at my notes here. I think Commissioner Barnett's comment about having a historic district by force is very interesting. Again, a couple of folks here tonight that went through it recently, and I don't think we should do anything by force. I think, historic districts can be very good for our community, but we certainly should have a community buy-in for it, and I don't think we got that last time when this last district was proposed. So with that, I think that will wrap up this conversation, and barring any other comments from council members. Dr. Goodman, quickly, briefly.
Thank you very much for your courtesy.
Sure.
I did have one more remark that your comment brought to mind, and that is the Downers Grove Heritage Preservation Corporation, which is a private not-for-profit, owned the 1846 Blodgett House, and we've since donated it to the Park District. And at the time we owned it, we thought that in order to expedite some grants and other things that require this kind of historic designation, we would like to have the village recognize and make the 1846 Blodgett House a historic landmark. So I prepared, and Jeff O'Brien, who was previously a major planner in our village, reviewed an application for historic landmark status of this building. It's quite an onerous process, and I can understand why an owner who's rather old and doesn't have all the photographic and other things that you would need in order to prepare an application according to the current specifications, would ask someone else to prepare it for him or her and sign off of it. I think that's what Millie Drew did for the Drew House designation. At any rate, we prepared this, and we had the position that since we intended to donate the house to the Park District, we would not proceed with the historic designation nomination or request designation unless the Park District had agreed that it would like this, because it wasn't our house to keep, it was our house to improve and give to the Park District. Well, the Park District Executive Director at that time, administrator, looked at the village ordinance and he said, no way, I'm not getting involved with all these restrictions. So I'm just pointing out that one of the prime candidates you have for this historic designation is the museum campus. It has both the Victorian house that is the museum, main museum house. It has now the 1846 Blodgett House. And so what I'm suggesting to you and the staff is that you talk to the Park District and find out how they feel about the current ordinance or the changes that you're making, because that is a prime candidate for historic landmarking in Downers Grove, and they really would like to have the landmark status if they felt that they could live with it. So it's sort of a litmus test of what you're working on and proposing, whether somebody who has houses that would qualify, owns houses that would be a real gem in the crown of the village, is willing and able to live with the ordinance that you're working on. So be sure to talk to the Park District. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Goodman. And that concludes our first reading.
So the next time we talk about this, probably be in the first week of March or so, we'll talk not only about how we regulate, but how we facilitate and how the village could provide incentives beyond what's provided at the federal and state level. And so we will touch on those as well when we get to that portion of the meeting. So thank you.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Stan, for your presentation. Next item on our agenda is item 10, Mayor's Report. There is no Mayor's Report. Moving right along to item 11, the Manager's Report.
We do have a manager's report tonight. I've asked our Public Works Director, Nan Newland, to describe to us the very recent snowstorm we just endured and the village's response and our performance during that event. Nan.
Thank you, Dave. Good evening. I'm pleased to be here tonight to report on the village's response to Sunday's storm event. I just want to give you a brief overview. This system was forecast several days in advance. It originated in Baja, California, and covered 23 states. On Sunday, a blizzard warning went into effect because of predicted winds over 40 miles an hour and 10 to 16 inches of snowfall. Many of you have seen these images already. The result of this storm was a snowfall that produced the 5th highest amount of snow on record, which is you'll see on the top photograph there. 19.3 inches measured at O'Hare Airport on Sunday. You may remember the 3rd highest snow event shown there on the top photo. That was referred to as the Groundhog Day storm of 2011, which produced 2 more inches than what we experienced on Sunday. In 1979, which is the 4th storm on this list, that's the storm that got Jane Byrne elected as mayor of Chicago in 1979. And that was only 1 inch more of snow than we experienced on Sunday. As you can see by the lower photograph on this slide, the Downers Grove area is one of the highest snow-producing areas of Sunday's storm system, which included the initial system that we experienced as well as following lake effect snow that we also received here in Downers Grove. At the risk of sounding too much like Tom Skilling, I'd like to give you a few more statistics to help you put this in perspective. The area has been keeping snow records for 129 years. In an average year, we typically get about 1 snow event that's over 5 inches of snow. And of the 3,700 snow events that have been recorded over this 129-year period, this was the 5th largest. So statistically, 99.9% of the snow events we get are lesser than the event we experienced. Sunday's storm began at 8 p.m. on Saturday evening, the 31st of January. It ended at 5 a.m. yesterday, Monday. We had 19.3 inches of accumulation reported in Downers Grove, and at times we had over an inch an hour of snow falling. To give you an idea of what the village is responsible for during a snow event, we plow 167 centerline miles of village streets, 340 cul-de-sacs, which are typically priority 3s. Through streets are categorized as priority 1s and 2s, and cul-de-sacs primarily as level 3 priority. We also plow downtown sidewalks, as well as commuter and downtown parking lots and train platforms, as well as school crosswalks. The village response to this snow event has been a continuous 24-hour operation beginning 7 p.m. on Saturday. We have 12-hour shifts, which we are still in, with 16 drivers per shift. In addition to village employees, we also contract for service for the downtown and train platforms with snow systems. Because of the magnitude of this event, we also brought in last night a contract hauling company who will also be in this evening assisting us bringing in their large trucks that we can put snow in to haul it over to Public Works. The Park District graciously agreed today to help us in clearing the school crosswalks, which was a great help. Our building services staff and our fire department staff also jumped in and helped in various activities during the storm as well. The village has in our snow policy target response times for our various levels of priority streets. Priority 1 streets are typically the highest volume streets in the village, as well as some streets that provide access to the hospital and to schools. The target level of service for priority 1 streets is to keep these streets passable during storm events, as well as cleared within 12 hours after the end of a storm. Priority 2 streets are primarily all other through streets in the village, and the level of service for these is to be cleared within 12 hours after the end of the storm. And priority 3 streets are cul-de-sacs and dead-end streets, and the target level of response is to have them passable within 18 hours after the end of the storm. The next slide will give you a rundown of the actual targets, what we did meet during the storm. In priority 1 streets, we were able to keep them open throughout the storm, and within an hour after the end of the storm event, they were all plowed to the curb for our priority 1 streets. So the storm ended Monday at 5 a.m., and as of 6 a.m. Monday, they were cleared. Some do continue to be snowpacked because of the low temperatures we experienced, and some of them are bare pavement. Priority 2 streets were cleared by 7 p.m. on Monday, which is within 14 hours after the end of the storm, which is 2 hours beyond our target in our service level. And priority 3 streets were plowed and passable within 20 hours after the end of the storm by 1 a.m. this morning. Those are our cul-de-sacs. Resources that we added as a village for this year's season, following our experience from last season, were a great help in our response to this storm. Those include the addition of a 5-ton plow to our operation, a plow attachment for a loader, a sidewalk snow clearing machine. All these were great additions to our equipment this year for the storm. We also expanded our salt storage, and we added temporary and seasonal plow drivers to fill in for extended leaves due to some employee leave of absences. All those things were critical additions to our operation this year. As I said, we're still in snow operations right now. We expect to be in this operation throughout at least the end of this weekend. Right now, we are focused on eliminating the snowpack on all streets in the village. We are also focused on hauling away. We have Ice Fest this weekend, so we are focused on getting the downtown clean for visitors and in our downtown, make it safe and accessible. We are also looking to reduce site obstructions where we have large piles near intersections and areas where there's limited space to keep those piles of snow. We Did get some snow tonight. Our crews are out this evening, salting and plowing all the streets throughout the village, and there's also a prospect for some snow tomorrow as well. So we will continue those operations as well as we continue to clear up from the snow from the weekend. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions or follow-up.
Well, what just strikes me is the similarity of this storm to the storm we had on Groundhog's Day in 2011. And we learned a lot since that time. That was another extreme event. And then last year was a series of moderate to extreme events, and we again learned from that. What strikes me here is how close we got to our standards on all three levels in such an extreme event. A very different story than we experienced in 2011. So we want to thank the council for giving us the resources required, the extra space in the salt zone, more drivers. We only had 13 drivers, sometimes 12 on the street back in 2011. Now 16. Bigger trucks, more resources. So to come this close on such an extreme event to our standards, which are really geared for 5-inch storms or less, was really nothing short of a council commitment to excellence in snow plowing, and really Nan and her team and everybody else at the village who stepped up and met those service level standards, even in such a extreme event. So we're happy to answer any questions or take any comments if you have.
I'll throw one comment out there. I think, the unsung responders who are really close to us right now are the guys over in Fleet. I don't think they showed up on any of your slides tonight, but they literally keep the fleet running, not only our fleet, but also other people's trucks and equipment around the community that they respond for. So they're also on snow operations, and I think they're on 12-hour shifts as well. The garage is always open, and I think that helps keep our service level at the point that it says, not just for our snowplow vehicles, but for our police and fire vehicles as well during these big snow events. The one question I had, Nan, maybe you can explain a little bit about downtown and snow systems. That I understand they experienced some difficulty with equipment, and tonight we're going to take care of, working on taking care of getting that snow out of the downtown this evening.
Their typical response relies on, they have brooms that is their primary equipment for the downtown. And the brooms just weren't enough to handle the amount of snow that they got, so those went down pretty quickly. So they did some scrambling and brought in some different equipment. They're also, I think we're fortunate that we are able to go into continuous operations. They come in and put all their people on the street, so when they operate, they sometimes operate over 24 hours and then they send them home. So I think we are fortunate that we go into this 24-hour period mode with different shifts that allows us to continually operate. Whenever you bring a contractor in, they aren't our crews, so we work as best as we can with them, and their equipment had some issues, but they are up and running now. They've brought in some beefier equipment and are making progress. So we're working with them on clearing the downtown.
Great, thank you. Questions or comments from the council? Commissioner Rozay?
Thank you. A couple of quick ones. You mentioned snowpack, and I've gotten a lot of feedback about, hey, a lot of the roads are still snowpacked. You talked about the low temperature. Could you give us a little bit more information about the effectiveness of salt and how we treat it and the ability to get that snowpack off the road?
Well, the three factors that really facilitate melting with the salt is temperature. Salt is not real effective when the temperatures got as low as they were. They were, I think, around 15 degrees most of the day on Monday. The other thing is sun, which we did get some sun on Monday, which helped. And the third thing is traffic. So we saw the best results with salt where we put it on the highest volume streets. With the friction of the tires going over, it really facilitated that salt working. Salt becomes less and less effective as it's on the lower volume streets. So what we did throughout the event is we did salt where we found it was working and backed off on the salt use on those lower volume streets where we weren't getting the results from you had to put it down at such a high rate that it would be a lot of salt to get the kind of snowpack melt that we would want on those lower volume streets in the conditions that we've had so far. We're putting it down tonight. The temperatures are going up. It's supposed to be going up into about 26 in the lower 20s tonight, so it should become more effective as we reach into tomorrow.
My second question has to do with the priority 1 versus priority 2 and priority 3. There were a lot of folks that gave comments about when's a plow coming by my house? When's a plow going to hit my street? Is there a way to, and I don't need an answer on the quantification now, but is there a way to quantify what the impact would be on the service level for priority 1 streets if we were to divert certain resources to priority 2, priority 3 streets? And what how much less passable a priority 1 street would be in that situation?
So that has a lot to do with the characteristics of the storm itself. It has mostly to do with how fast the snow is falling and how long it takes you to get through your priority 1 pass and how long it takes you to get through a priority 2 pass. With some of the rates of fall, 1 inch an hour, when you consider that it takes about 6 hours to drive a route and consider the normal snow conditions of 5 inches or less, you really, if you had gone through your normal route and gone those 2s, your priority 1s during that 2, 3, 4 hour period would have that many inches.
Would have had a half foot of snow.
So the challenge with this particular event, the one in 2011, is snowing so fast that any deviation really could significantly impact your priority 1s, and that takes us right back to our standard. You notice our standard only has 1 priority that says keep it passable during the storm, and so that literally is our top priority. In moderate events and more mild events, of course the mild ones, we just plow our routes in the order and there's no issue. Moderate events, you get around 5 or 6 inches, we jump off priority 1s into the 2s and back onto the 1s, and that can be very effective. We did that in this event a couple of times. It became very challenging because the longer it took us to just deviate into the 2s, the higher and higher the 1s got. So really, it has to do mostly with the characteristics of the storm. The more intense the storm, the harder it is to keep 2s open as at the same time you keep 1s open. And then what the great thing about this discussion is it really focuses on the desired outcomes. We have a great history of working very well as a community with council playing their role and staff playing ours. Usually what we do is we take a look at that service standard over the summer after we experience whatever we learned from the previous winter's event. That's what we did last year. We can, at that time, in that review, start talking about, well, what does it look like if we wanted to keep 2s passable during the event? What does it look like if you want to lower the response time to 6 hours, 10 hours, or keep it at 12? And those are the kind of things we look at. The issue here is in the extreme events, the 99% plus events, whatever standard we put up there becomes extremely difficult and resource intensive.
Great. Thanks. Other comments, questions? Commissioner Barnett?
I just want to kind of jump on to Greg's train there a little bit. My observation is that we did, as that demonstrates, well versus our plan. What I guess I'm kind of not sure, I don't have a high level of confidence in, is whether the plan that we collectively put together with our input from Nan and her team this summer is really the same, matches up well with the expectations of our residents. And so I think we need to just put a big asterisk. We're not doing this now because it's a huge budget issue and it's an operational issue, but when it comes time to revisit our snow operations, the last time we did that, my recollection was that this group, 7 of us, had precious little to say, other than thanks for looking into it, glad we're making some improvements. I think we need to give some thought and be prepared to talk about whether or not we want to model up what different expectations look like. Because that's where I think that maybe there's a gap between the public's expectations and what's happening is really within this group's setting of goals and standards. So I say that not to be, Councilman Buzzkill or critical of our public works guys because they're plowing their brains out, but the snowpack issue is one that I've heard an awful lot about. Widths of second passes, cul-de-sacs, we're doing what we said we're going to do. The question is, are we setting the standards at the right spot? And I'm not sure we are. So hopefully we'll all remember to take that subject up with maybe a little more diligence from this group when it comes time to talk about it again.
I think from my perspective, to add on to that, maybe that's something, I know Dave keeps a short list for long-range planning activities. I don't know if that rises to that level as an action item, but certainly in the review for next year, as we do every year, to keep that fresh. I think the one item, the commentary that I've heard from many residents and about setting expectations and what the residents' expectation is versus what our targets are the cul-de-sacs. So that would be my one, question. What could we do differently? And as Commissioner Barnett said, as I've been sitting here, I'm seeing the end loaders and the plows go by outside, and you can tell they're end loaders because they're really high up. You can see their lights, but, these storms are all different, and there's so many variables to them. Not only the road conditions, the amount of drivers traveling, having a school day or a snow day helps a little bit because the traffic level goes down, but then that doesn't help with the salt and getting the snowpack off the roads. I think one of the interesting things is that even though we have more salt and we could have used it, we're using it in a responsible way so it makes sure it works and activates the right way. I think that's a really important note to put on this storm and how we've used our salt supply.
Last summer, we talked extensively as a group, council and staff, about keeping the standards the same, but trying to add more resources so that if we had an extreme event or a series of moderate events that had an extreme effect, that we would come much closer to our service level. Clearly, we achieved that, which leads now into is what Commissioner Barnett was saying, is this the right service level? And are we trying to apply this service level in every event, or up to the 90% event, or the 95%, or 100%? So we continue to explore that, and every summer we bring back sort of lessons learned, and we'll do that again. And if at that time you'd like us to sort of model the financial and operational issues associated with the change, we would be happy to do so.
Thank you. Commissioner Rankin?
I know we're going to be talking about this app concept later on, but when I was speaking, not today, but later on in the future, when I was speaking to a resident today, she was saying that she, didn't get her street plowed till whatever, and I, was trying to figure out what priority level her street was. It'd be great if on our mapping system, you could see what priority level street you were, when you were expected, like ComEd, when's your expected restoration time? I mean, maybe that's beyond our scope, but then there's less people, we could refer people to the website, they could try to answer their own questions and know what to expect.
We can look into that. It's very easy using current technology to use the standard as the expectation, because even this extreme event, we were so very close to the standard. It would be another leap to start getting into sort of real-time modeling and expectations of when a pass would take through or take place in your neighborhood. So we have explored that pretty extensively last season. We came up with some pretty interesting operational and policy challenges. So we're always looking at that, and we can continue to look at that with the mobile app discussion.
Well, and maybe it's just, you're a priority 3, you're expected, and I guess that's kind of what you said, but you're expected to be, because I think people expect that they're going to be able to drive out of their driveway right when they need to. And if that's not what we're planning on doing, we should make that very clear.
There was a very unique aspect of this storm. Of course, in my role, I was up on Sunday night and woke up again early on Monday morning, and I turned on the news. The first thing they said is, well, if you thought everything was going to be cleared up in time for you to go to work this morning, you're wrong. And that was really because the snow was so heavy up until 5 a.m. A lot of us watched maybe a football game, sit up a little bit, went to bed, and have the expectation that it was going to be business as usual on Monday. And clearly that wasn't the case. We could start translating what that would actually mean in terms of level of service. That actually would be a 2-hour turnaround in all 3 levels of priorities. We did hear from many residents who did have the same expectation that many of us did, that come Monday morning it would all be cleared off, and we did hear that from some folks.
Thank you.
Commissioner Durkin?
Yeah, thank you. I just want to thank everyone for their job that they did, the hard work, the long hours, the constant fighting the snowflake. And it means a lot to all of us. But I think we have large areas of improvement. I was pretty critical of the storm with Manager Fieldman. He can tell you that. We've had a number of discussions. I think we as a village do an outstanding job for snowfalls that last less than 12 hours. But when you look at the historical data and the number of communications we receive, both verbally and email or letters to the council, it's those storms that are longer that we seem to drop the ball at. And I say drop the ball, not because of staff. Maybe it's because of the means that we have, or the equipment we have, or the amount of manpower we have, or we want a budget for such a thing. But what is really alarming to me is the fact, when you look at this chart, the only streets we really care about are the priority number ones. And we all live near priority number one. But nothing else gets touched until after the storm ends. And that is where the aggravation lies. At least that's where my aggravation lied over this past weekend. And I know that the storm was going on, and I know that the state and the other cities and villages had their issues as well. But I think that's the area we need to look at. We can't, in my opinion, wait until after the storm ends, by 12 hours, to have a time frame that we're going to take care of the street. We received a lot of communications, a lot of Facebook posts, tweets, whatever you want to call it, social media, regarding cul-de-sacs. And I know that other municipalities contract out their cul-de-sacs, and I'd like us to look at that. Now, I know that there's a lot of stipulations per union contracts with what you can and cannot do with privatization, but you know what? The number one complaint we continuously received, and there were two e-remarks about cul-de-sacs. And I think that's an area that needs to be done. We were hesitant looking at the downtown central business district going out to being privatized, but you know, we did that. And that's put our guys, our staff, back into other areas of focus. And I think the service levels that we are providing to the cul-de-sacs in particular is far below the level that I think we all want to see up here. To me, it's substandard. So as we look at, and I agree that we should look at this in the summer months after we have this season to look at and reflect on what we did and what we didn't do, or what we could do better, I think that's the best time to do it. And I know every snowfall is a different education process for all of us collectively, but I think it's something historically that we have a lot of information today for. One of the concerns that I have, that I think we can look at before the summertime, is when we talk about sidewalks. We sit up here, we ask you not to walk in the street, we ask you to clean your sidewalk, we ask you to do so many things, including cleaning out your fire hydrant, which, by the way, if you haven't done so, please, we ask you to seriously consider that, because if you need it in the middle of the night, if it's buried like a couple that I know are in my neighborhood, I hope the firemen know they're there, but you know what, if they need to clean them out, that's time, and we don't want to waste that. So I know we'll be out staff-wise. I know I'll be out as soon as I can to clean out the one in my neighborhood if it's not done by neighbors. Is when our snowplow drivers are cleaning the street and they're packing the snow or building the piles to get the wing rows out from the intersections, they have a tendency to push it in to the ends, which causes the sidewalks to be blocked. And those sidewalk ends basically are bus stops. Can we look at that? I know we had a resident put something on Facebook, a picture of one. It took me an hour to clean out the bus stop in front of my home for the neighborhood kids who ride the bus. Can we at least look at that? I know we had crews out, but maybe as a practice, they push it to another area, so we do keep, especially the elementary kids, off the street when they're waiting for the buses.
Yeah, that was one of the major lessons learned or issues that brought up that Mr. Durkin's talking about, is the correlation between school bus routes, bus stops, and our prioritization list. Absolutely.
Okay. But overall, I think we learned by every one of these storms. It's just that, we have to review, and I think the numbers will speak as to what level do we want to do this, and it's setting the expectation for the resident. Unfortunately, my phone was ringing because my neighbors all wanted to go to church on Sunday and they couldn't get out. They weren't calling and complaining about not getting out for Super Bowl. It was because they couldn't get to church, which is understandable because of the amount of snow that came during the night hours. But I appreciate staff's time and this report. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Bryant?
Thanks, Jeff. Yeah, just, I've mentioned this before, and not specific to snow, but for our conversations forward and this group's, deliberation, you don't have to, I'm not going to get into semantics, but whether you want to call it climate change or global warming, the severity of storms, floods, tornadoes, blizzards, seem to be increasing. Now, is it cyclical? I don't know. I don't really care. Part of our job is, and this level of government, is to try and help people get sort of restored to normalcy when these catastrophes or major weather events happen. And so, Sean, you talk about downtown, you talk about privatizing cul-de-sacs maybe. I think we need to be mindful of and looking for ways to sort of force multiply, because the fact is at least in the time that I've been sitting up here, what we've seen are less storms but more severe ones. whether there's rain or there's snow, whatever. And so the ability of us to somehow leverage up capacities and leverage up tools, it has to be part of our focus, because, what we're all going to do is be thrilled that we didn't get any snow through November and December, right? And then we got hammered. And I think that's normal. I think we should expect to see more of that. So as we go forward and thinking about setting expectations, we also need to think about the backside, which is resources to accommodate those, and how might they be quickly and easily scalable without turning into, 12-month obligations. So I don't know what that looks like exactly, but I wanted to bring it out there. I've mentioned it before when we talk about limb pickup and flood restorations. These are likely to continue, and we're going to constantly be looked at to try and get people back to normal. So let's think about that.
Jeff? I was thinking about how school is closed on Monday, and do we ask the school district, if you're not plowing, if you've got your schools taken care of, can we borrow your folks and you bill us? Or same with the park district, have we ever had this conversation?
We've, speaking from 100% local experience, because I'm one of those plowers, usually it goes the other way. Usually we ask the village for assistance, specifically on these big storms, moving out the piles because we're out of space. I think Nan put on her materials tonight that the Park District was going to assist with corners. I know that there's been conversation from Stan Balicki, who's here tonight, also with my superiors at District 58 about partnering to do that as well. So yeah, that is constantly out there. For District 58's perspective, we just finished Monday night with our routes, and not routes, but our buildings at about I think 4 o'clock after 10 hours on Sunday. So we were ready for a break, and our equipment needed to take a break also. We were lucky this time around that all our equipment stayed with us, but we used everything from snow blowers, shovels, plows, to tractors with snow blowers on them. So I think the spirit of partnership is alive and well in all of our municipalities in town. I know that the Public Works Department was able to procure an end loader from the sanitary district for another piece of equipment to use. So things like that are constantly happening and will continue, I hope, to happen for sure.
We'd like to look at formalizing some of those relationships, because right now the phone calls back and forth are working pretty well, but leveraging resources that were sitting idle, like in this case, a Saturday, Sunday storm, and a lot of the school district staffing, equipment was sitting idle. That's a concept we'd like to explore even further to formalize. And then maybe we can return the favor on Monday. Our equipment can very easily make it through some school district parking lots very quickly. So I think it's a great idea.
The other thing too is that each municipality has different specific equipment for their uses. So, we have more blowers, I think, than the village does in District 58, and same thing with the Park District for sure. So definitely some good partnership opportunities there. And I think that storm in 11, that groundhog day storm, had 2 snow days associated with it for the schools compared to just 1 for this storm, and the amount of inches weren't that far off. So that kind of tells you too about the response. When the storm fell, obviously has a deciding factor on how that plays out, but that goes to what else was happening not only on our priority routes, but then the other county, state, and other highways that go through and are in our community as well.
We had a significant improvement in priority 3s between the 2011 storm and this storm.
Thank you. Looks like Dr. Gunn has a comment about the snow report.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Newstead. Actually, I was looking for the public comment on items off of the agenda, but it turns out I was going to comment on the snow removal here. I had occasion today to drive around to several communities, maybe half a dozen local communities around us, and nobody had done the job that Downers Grove did. It was really treacherous on many of the streets that I drove on other communities, where ours were very safe, and it was a great relief to get back to Downers Grove. I particularly was impressed by the managers saying that they were able to adjust during the storm and sometimes bring the plows to work on the priority 2 and priority 3 streets if they thought they had a little leeway, and then they could compare how much attention they needed to give priority one streets and went back to keeping them passable. But I think that flexibility and ability to control the situation according to the local conditions is very important, and you should congratulate your staff on the balancing act they've done. The other comment I wanted to make is that I remember the appraisal of last year and the 2011 storm, something that was very important was that you asked the drivers, you asked your people on the front lines what they thought would be an improvement. What changes do you need? What do we have to do in order for you to be able to do your job even better? And I think that the results in this storm show how well that advice was given and taken. This is just an outstanding achievement, and I know we all have little things that we're concerned about. I'm concerned about the lack of clearing in front of the post office. In general, the downtown area sidewalks did have accessibility from the parking related to those structures, but not in front of the post office. I don't know what's wrong there, but maybe the post office isn't participating in the downtown management or whatever it is that guides the clearing around the downtown. But except for that little island, everything seemed to be very passable when I came into town after my travels this evening. And I would like to suggest that we give some attention to how we keep the, particularly the access from the slant park lots, places in front of the post office safe, because people currently have to walk through the street in back of all the parked cars in order to get around to the driveway to get into the post office. And again, the sidewalk along the east side of the post office is a very important commuter access to the parking garage and other things. So all of that post office contingent, all of the sidewalk adjacent to the post office is really something that needs a lot of attention that it's not getting at present. But other than that, I think we did an outstanding job, and congratulations.
Thank you, Dr. Goodman. Crews are taking care of those piles of snow by the post office and other places in downtown as we speak tonight. Other comments? Sir?
Yeah. Todd Paradis, 417 67th Court. Clearly, I'm on different streets than Gordon's driving on, and I don't know if you go out to Municipal out here, you can't even get to the train station. So, again, I live on a court, so I'm right below the Black Sheep, the Ugly Duckling, that's where we're at. And we knew that when we moved in. And this year in particular, we went to church, and I said, we'll take my wife's car. Mine's rear-wheel drive. Came home, what's coming down my street? 2 plows, tandem. You got on my block, 10-ton trucks. On my block? That's unheard of. Okay, so the one guy goes around, next guy leaves all kinds of ruts. They lift their plow up when they come to the end of the cul-de-sac, big ruts, can't get out. The other guy, he goes around this way. I stopped him, I said, if you go the opposite way, you'll make it. Oh, it's my first day, that guy didn't tell me. So, but again, you get 2 trucks, then I go for a walk, they're on the other block, same thing, tandem plowing cul-de-sacs. The guy's sitting there waiting for this guy to turn around. Why don't you do this block, you do that block? I don't understand it. The efficiency was lacking. Yeah, I mean, it's just, I drove around, I must have went east and Gordon must have went west, because I look at Darien, Willowbrook, Westmont, the streets were a lot clearer. Doesn't matter, we don't know what their stuff is, but on a cul-de-sac, passable 18 hours after the storm event, it's just not acceptable. You guys gotta send a plow. I don't care if you don't do a good job, blow it down and blow out so people can get out. We're stuck in our house for 24 hours. I think they were there at 11 o'clock on Sunday. We didn't see them again. I went to work on Monday, but we didn't see them again, my wife said, until that afternoon. Then they came last night, cleaned up the cul-de-sac. Where did they put the snow? Right in front of the hydrant that I shoveled out. It's just asinine. It's just, I mean, I know they're doing a good job. They're trying. I mean, there's only so much they can do, but it's one of those things where you look at this, I go out there, snow blower, plow the hydrant out, just like you said. Come home, streets 6 feet, they got the plow, so they're not on the edge on the outside, 4 feet on the inside. That's not acceptable. It's just, I mean, and again, it's a different event, and great minds can disagree. I know we've had our disagreement, but I also give kudos when you guys are doing a good job, and, you know, it's one of those things where I think it's important to talk to drivers. I mean, I plowed snow in Willowbrook when I was in high school and in college. In the winters, we plowed their cul-de-sacs. That's what we did. Okay, contract it out. I heard that mentioned today. Obviously, you got your regulations that you have to work within, but it's something that people just expect it. And we're not saying we need a great job done, but get it done right. I mean, you're wasting time sending these guys out there, especially those 10-ton dump trucks, 2 of them sitting on my block. I'm like, this is crazy. You know, I'm cul-de-sac 85. And we know it has an island in there, and it's difficult. It's a weird-shaped island, but, you know, all my neighbors are like, this is crazy. So enough said about that. Granted, the guys are working hard. Everybody loves that money, time and a half, whatever it is. It's a tough job, though. 12 hours on, 12 hours off, and do it again and do it again. It's a tough job, and there's a lot of aggravation, but, you know, you guys got to talk with the residents, too, not just the drivers. Because I think this year is worse than past years. Come by my house, man, I'll show you what we're talking about. It's crazy. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments on snow before we get to public comments?
Yeah, I think more front-end loaders, Dave.
We did have several brand-new drivers that was part of the additional crew. We're hoping to train them on smaller events, but it just didn't work out that way, so we do appreciate Mr. Paradis' comments.
It's like stepping in for the Super Bowl, you never know when your number's called, right?
Good evening, ma'am.
I'm not here about the snow,
Well, we're still talking about that, right?
okay.
We're talking about snow, or anybody other questions about snow and snow report from the audience?
Sorry.
Okay.
That ends our report tonight.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Nan, for your report. That means we're on to item number 12. Thank you for the movement on the agenda. This is item 12, public comments on items not appearing on our regular agenda. Yes, ma'am.
My name is Edith Larson, and I live at 915 59th Place in Downers Grove, which is part of the Clyde Estates subdivision, so I'm here still with those issues, as I was a couple weeks ago. We were all here until 11:30. Anyway, I am a life resident of Downers Grove, as was my dad, and our family's been here since 1839. So I'm pretty rooted here, and I have an interest in the village and its history and preserving the legacy we have. When I was growing up, which I grew up at the corner of 55th and Carpenter Street, I had friends who lived in the Clyde Estates area, and so I was a visitor there on fairly regularly on occasions. It's a wonderful, friendly, calm, and peaceful neighborhood with the winding streets and those nice triangle islands. Actually, now, after reading the agenda, or the minutes for the last meeting, I realized one of those you have now readjusted to leave it the way it is, which is great. But I kind of wonder how it got decided that we needed all this traffic control and what's the word I want? The water retention area things instead of the nice park-like triangles that are there now. It doesn't seem to me that that's a logical place for stormwater retention areas, because that's one of the highest places in the subdivision, and the water is coming off the berm from the YMCA field way to the east of there. It's primarily the people that live in the southeast corner of Clyde Estates that are getting so much of the water, and several of them don't have basements, which makes it even worse, because now their actual living space is getting wet. But it seemed to me that years ago, I don't remember many years ago, but the berm and all that was approved behind the Y field. Unfortunately, because that's higher than Clyde, it all comes down from the east of that berm into the eastern corner of Clyde Estates. Also, putting the sidewalks in, it seems to me, is getting rid of some of the area you're covering with concrete area that now can, take stormwater. Anyway, I just felt like those ditch things would just become an eyesore where they're located, where they're planned to be located now. Whereas if we put, say, a north-south running ditch along the western border of the Y field that butts up against the eastern boundary of the people that live in Clyde, it would seem to me, A, be a cheaper way to deal with it. B, it wouldn't be unsightly because most of the people's yards on the eastern end there are wooded, and all the activity on the Y field is played farther east, so there wouldn't be kids falling in it or anything. It just seemed like that would be, and since that's where the water problem is, it seemed like that would be a more logical place to put it. I personally live in a higher area, so I don't get flooded. The only time we've had water is when the storm got rid of the electricity and our sump pump wouldn't work, so it wasn't a problem otherwise. When we talked 2 weeks ago about the installation of the sidewalks, it just seemed to me that the village's insistence on doing that is kind of misplaced. I understand that it's a policy, and I understand it was, or at least I assume it was mostly done because of a safety issue for people walking. I'm not generally opposed to sidewalks. When I was first married, I lived on Oakwood Avenue, just south of Pierce Center School, and we did not have sidewalks, and we felt there should be one there because it goes to the school. And when we put in our cement driveway, we put in the driveway, the sidewalk too, just even at our own expense. So it's not that I'm opposed to sidewalks, I just think we ought to be able to adjust where we would actually put them, and that some places maybe aren't the most suited to having sidewalks. As someone else mentioned, I think it was one of the letters to the editor last week in the Reporter, that the ditches that now are along the roadway would be further impinged by sidewalks being there, which would, again, undermine what we're trying to do about the water. The way the subdivision is divided, or plotted out, there are so many houses that have much more parkway space length than others because they're around a curve, so it's more like pie-shaped, and so they would have an inordinate amount of sidewalk to have to shovel compared to other people. And it's, because it's a policy and not really a law or an ordinance or anything, it seems that there ought to be a way to understand some, or take into consideration some extenuating circumstances for the neighbors such as ours where sidewalks really aren't needed. I mean, they kind of don't go anywhere in this subdivision, they just go in a circle or they go around a curve, and, they don't go to a place somewhere like they would for a school on a straight street or something like that. In 33 years that I've lived there, I mean, I'm in the Clyde Estates now myself, and I've been there for 33 years. There's never been an accident between two cars or between a car and a pedestrian. So I don't see that there's a big safety issue about needing sidewalks. As for the speeding along Washington Street, I haven't personally witnessed it, but again, I live on 59th Place, so I'm a little block or so removed. But I do drive on Washington Street myself. The speed limit's posted at 20, and I suppose a lot of us who run through there at 25, but certainly not at such a high speed that it's a horrible problem. Whenever I drive through the subdivision, it's rare for me to even meet another car, and if I do, it's only one. When I'm walking my dog at night, I might see 2 or 3 cars during a 3 or 4 block walk in the subdivision, but it's just not a big deal. I suppose maybe at rush hour, Washington's a big problem, but I again, even living there 33 years, I haven't seen a problem with traffic.
Ms. Larson, if I could just ask you to wrap it up, we usually have about a 5-minute window for guest comments.
I think many of our Clyde Estates neighbors feel that we're supposed to be living in a representative democracy, but it's kind of feeling like in this case, it's government overreach that's going to hurt the constituents there. We didn't say we wanted sidewalks. We all agree we need the street. It hasn't ever been done in the 33 years I've been there, so it's definitely a need. But as far as the other things, it seems to me it's expense we don't really need to make. And we do need the street, but I don't think we need the sidewalks or the other big drainage ditches that will actually, ruin the natural beauty of our subdivision. So, thank you.
Thank you for your comments and coming tonight. Just as a reminder, if you guys could give us your name, address, and then if we could try to limit comments to 5 minutes, so we could have everybody have a chance to speak tonight. Thank you.
John Palifka, 6016 Washington, Clyde Estates. I've been a resident there a little over 40 years. I want to start with the process of this whole project. The village has done traffic studies north of 55th Street. I would think in an area where you're going to spend $2.5 million in improvements, a traffic study would have been warranted. I live on Washington. I believe there's traffic issues there. Are they caused by cut-through traffic from people avoiding light at 59th and Main, coming off of Clyde and Main? Is traffic coming from 61st and Washington, or is it 59th and Washington? We're trying to solve a problem, and we don't know the cause of the problem. And I think a traffic study would go a long way to helping that. We've had 2 neighborhood meetings. I would suggest a change in the format of those meetings. Meeting starts out with a presentation of the project, question and answer session, view the drawings, people go home. I would think it would be beneficial to present the project, have 10 or 15 minutes to review the drawings, and then have a comprehensive question and answer session. And I think me being here would be eliminated if it was done correctly. Both meetings, residents asked why we have to have sidewalks. They were told you have no choice. It's a long-standing policy of the Village of Downers Grove to have a sidewalk on each street, one side of each street. Same residents come here, ask that question. They're referred to some past council that passed an ordinance requiring a sidewalk on one side of each street. I would think that a program that's been in progress for over 20 years, multi-million-dollar program involving sidewalks, would have been reviewed periodically, if for no other reason than to give staff current information to work with. Street paving. We had a traffic circle proposed as a traffic calming solution at Clyde. I'm reading from a memo from the Public Works Director to the Village Manager dated January 21st, 2015. That traffic circle was eliminated to preserve one tree. On page 2, changes to the plans. Eliminate the proposed traffic circle at the intersection of Washington and Webster and retain the existing large tree. Page 3, under traffic calming, traffic circle at the interchange of Washington, Webster, and 60th. The proposed improvements were presented at the second public meeting, and with few exceptions, they were very well received by the residents. Well, the majority of residents seem to have received that particular improvement well, but yet we've eliminated because someone is concerned about a tree. I don't have, and I don't think the village knows at this time, how many trees will be lost on public and private property. And I'm going to, just something I noticed while I was sitting here through the council meeting, the sidewalks will be very close to the roadway in many places. And I don't believe we will have trees in the parkway where those sidewalks are very close to the roadway. Again, I'm referring to a drawing that was in that same memo. In some places, the sidewalk will be almost on the roadway. The tree in front of my house, nice ginkgo, I believe that once they root prune it for a sidewalk and then re-ditch, there's not going to be much left of the roots of that tree. And is that tree going to grow to damage the sidewalk and block the ditch? Drainage. 5900 block of Washington, I know that there is a problem, and I believe the residents are working with the village. That's on private property. I know of 2 places on Washington, water stands in the ditch after a prolonged rain at culverts that appear to be plugged. The YMCA, you just heard about that. I walked that easement on the east side of Clyde and the west side of the YMCA. It appears that when the DuPage Water Commission placed a water main through there, they built berms. I cannot tell by eye if that land is pitched correctly anymore. I would think it would be good if the village would look into that and see if some of that could be regraded or storm sewers needed back there. Sidewalks. I said there, some of them are too close to the road, and Councilman Durkin, I had 2.5 snow shovels. You come over, we'll pick out a stretch of sidewalk that's right next to the road, and we'll see how long it takes to shovel out 10 feet out of a couple hundred feet. Residents are not going to be able to do it when the plow places that snow up there and it freezes. Now, let's take a walk down Washington. There's an existing sidewalk on the east side from 59th to 60th Place. You walk directly south, and then the sidewalk curves to the east. About 80 feet, there will be a crossing. We'll cross to the south side of 60th, double back west a couple hundred feet to catch the sidewalk heading south on Washington again. So you have to walk out of your way to get someplace with this design. The normal person, I think, will take the shortest distance between 2 points, a straight line. They'll walk diagonally across that intersection. So we're spending a lot of money and not solving a problem. And then there's the sidewalk to nowhere. On 60th Place, east of Clyde, on the south side of the street, there's a sidewalk that starts at Clyde, goes to the easement, crosses no driveways or other sidewalks. I would assume that the residents will leave their home on the north side of 60th Place, cross the street, walk through the ditch, get on the sidewalk to walk west. I would propose that this project be tabled till the next construction season. I think there's just a whole lot of questions here that need to be answered, and maybe some of these issues could be addressed better with more time. And there's one more thing I want to read from this letter. Resident engagement has been extensive, and there appears to be significant neighbor support for the planned improvements. People that I have talked to, my friends and neighbors, are not in favor of some parts of this plan. So I don't see that there's that support. And the other comment that I got that upsets me a little bit is, don't waste your time talking to the village. They're going to do what they want. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, sir. Just a couple of things. There will be another neighborhood meeting scheduled for this project, as we like to have as many questions answered and offered. As far as the sidewalk review, this council does review the sidewalk plan each year for both existing and new sidewalks. It's part of our budgeting process each year. Actually, we're going to have a comprehensive review of the sidewalk plan village-wide and whether we want to add even more sidewalks to other sides of streets around the village. That'll be upcoming, I think, in a couple of weeks. Next week. And you heard probably in the last couple of discussions here on our village council, trees are very important to us, and whenever we put in sidewalks in neighborhoods, we take great care to make sure that we look out for the trees. So I appreciate your suggestions and your comments, and I will be sure that your address is listed on the information for the upcoming neighborhood meeting.
I waited a year to get that ginkgo because they couldn't plant it when I first ordered it. And it's a very nice tree. I'd like to see it grow. I won't be around when it's mature, but if it has to go, hey, it has to go. We'll plant another one someplace. I'll plant one on my property. But I just think that when you re-ditch, you can't plant a tree in that ditch because it's going to block the water flow. If you move it closer to the sidewalk, it's going to heave the sidewalk. So we're going to have areas of the village where we can't plant trees in the parkway. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Any other comments or questions of a general nature for items not appearing on our agenda, keeping in mind that we do have a 5-minute time limit?
As we wait for Mr. Brown to come to the microphone, Dave, are we under any kind of time restraint to get this area, besides possible construction cost increases, delaying it until next year, just based on the number of comments that we're receiving, both at the dais and email and telephone and neighborhood discussions?
It's obviously up to the direction of the council, so if we can delay it if you'd like. We are always trying to balance workload among years. We do have projects queued up, and I don't know if we need to sort of underutilize the staff this summer and then have to add on to the staff next summer if we want to keep the same projects in addition to this one for next summer. But generally speaking, outside of those concerns, it's just up to the direction of the council, of course.
Okay. Thanks, Dave. Mr. Brown, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you for allowing me to speak. And I wrote a letter because I just happened to see that we were coming forward with a plan to put sidewalks in Clyde Estates. And there are several, I guess only 2 or 3 more areas in our town which you may know about or don't know about, which are on this list to put sidewalks in. And apparently, we have a stamp, one size fits all or something, I don't know what it is, but the fact of the matter is, there are certain areas in this town that were never designed for sidewalks. Denver Woods happens to be one. The area I wrote the letter about is not a major area, but it's Clyde Estates. And if you go there, you can see that it would be a mistake to dig up all those triangles and so on. It's not a big area. And the amount of money, our tax money, that's going to go into that is going to far outweigh any benefits that I can see in there. There's never been an explanation to me as to why that area needs sidewalks. Let's see. You got Clyde Estates, you got Lime. Anyway, Denver Woods, which is very well known. And I don't really, to me, it's kind of an easy way to do. If I was told that we're going to have sidewalks every place that can use them, that's probably what I would do, but I wouldn't want to do that because I want to have, if you got a neighborhood that's already working well, you're not having a lot of crashes and things like that, why would you want to take tax dollars and spend it on sidewalks in areas that were never designed for sidewalks? And then create all sorts of havoc among the residents who live there, probably spend quite a bit of money just trying to stifle them when that isn't something that they want. This was done, in my mind, by just looking at all the areas that could possibly use them, and then just put stamps on, we're going to put sidewalks in those areas. I think it's a waste of our money that we could use for a lot of other things. And I don't live in that area anymore. I moved, but the people who moved there, I'm sure, in that area would resent the idea of taking and changing the whole area again. It doesn't make any sense to me. And I'm urging you to look at the sidewalk problem and make some sense out of it. I noticed a big expose, I guess, on things that the village needs. And one of them is dollars, tax dollars, to do things that you really need to put in, that you're going to have to put in eventually. So I wrote a letter to the paper. I've lived in this town, raised my family here since the late 40s. I served on the Downsgrove Village Council. Less people, but same kind of thing goes on. I don't think we let the meetings go quite this long, but it's a similar way of doing business. I was elected to the village council. A fellow named Frank Houck was head of the village department. He was really compared to what we'd had up until that time, I don't think you'd even really want to admit to it, but we got a lot of that straightened out. Now, he passed away a year ago. He moved out of town, first down to Missouri or something. Anyhow, this isolated residential area off Main Street, 59th and 61st Streets, east to Lyman, that's Clyde Estates. Not a very big area, but it's cut up into little streets that move around. It's just not something you would think of putting sidewalks in. There really isn't any need for it as far as I can tell. And the amount of money that we would spend on that could certainly be used for some of the things that we're talking about doing, like moving the village hall and things like that. I think that we ought to reevaluate our sidewalk program and really put a pencil to it to see if that's something we really want to do with our tax money. There's a lot of things that we can do with our tax money, as you probably realize, and I would put that way down the list. So that's just why I'm here, to try to alert you to make sure that it's given a good look. I don't think you'd come up with this being the #1 list of projects and the amount of money, dollar and cents wise, against what we'd be getting out of that. So that's why I'm here tonight, to alert you. I'll leave this letter. You want to keep it for the file? I don't know. All right. I don't have anything else to say, except I think it's really good you have more councilmen. If you get many more, you'll get more people than you get in the audience. But I think the more people you have who contribute, the better off you're going to be. I think that was a good move. But anyhow, thank you very much for allowing me to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Mr. Baker will take that letter for you, and we'll definitely get it into the file.
Oh, yeah, you can keep it. Sure. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thanks for joining us tonight.
I still live in Downsgrove. I live right across the street off of the, what's the name of that street? Can't remember it now. I don't remember the name of the street. But I live on the 4th floor, which is kind of nice because I can look out right down on Lemon Tree. And then a little bit to the right is Egg Harbor. Excellent food. Well, you know, I don't know if you know this. I would have never known it, but they sent a letter out. Said, we'll take your order on the phone and deliver it to your door. I thought, gee, that's neat. And we had this big storm and all, and I really didn't feel like going out in it. So I called him up. I swear, I didn't put that phone down 5 minutes, and the guy was knocking at the door with the order. If we could run our business the way that guy runs his, that would be fine. But anyway, thank you. I appreciate having an opportunity to talk to you, and good evening.
Thank you, sir.
Come back anytime.
Okay, I'll do it. Well, you make me sorry. Thank you.
Mike Davenport, and appreciate your patience. I was getting late, so I don't want to belabor things, but one thing it occurred to me sitting here, we talked about historic preservation earlier this evening, a little bit, and you think about what it means to be an historic district, the things that go into making an historic district, the character. As I listen to these comments about Clyde Estates, and I think about that neighborhood, there's things about that make it unique in town. And we talked about wanting to encourage some preservation, people having more interest in that. And so I'm wondering if, as you move forward and you start thinking about your sidewalk program, things like this, that maybe that's an element of the discussion that might be missing as you go forward. So just a little food for thought. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments of a general nature?
I'm Marlo Bowen. I'm here on behalf of a resident in Clyde Estates that is unable to come to the meeting. He lives on 60th Place. His name's Jim Hermanic. He's 93 years old. Our home was built in Clyde Estates in 1955, and I have lived in this beautiful, quiet neighborhood with a good many trees since then. I am on oxygen, so I am unable to attend village meetings. I have not been contacted by anyone from the village about my property. I understand the village wants to take away our neighborhood's unique character by removing the grass triangle with trees and putting in sidewalks. I see from the proposal language for the contract that was let to Christopher Burke Engineering that incorrectly identifies our neighborhood as being built in the 60s. It was created in 1952, and it was built in the mid-50s. Can it be true that the village will replace 2 triangles with a ditch? I do not have any stormwater issues as I am located adjacent to the highest elevation in Clyde Estates, if not the highest in the village. However, I do have the widest front yard, and it would be detrimental to my he has 3 large evergreen trees that are as old as his house in the front yard. They would be damaged, probably killed, to install the sidewalks. The rain would flood the sidewalks, and I am unable to shovel snow. In my 75 years of driving, I do not have any difficulty with traffic in our neighborhood, nor have there been any vehicular accidents to warrant such a project and the expense. My property faces both Washington and 60th Place, yet I still feel it's a secluded home. You are welcome to come and enjoy the value I and our neighbors place on the landscaping, trees, and front seat view of the green space we hope to keep. James Hermanic.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments of a general nature?
Good evening. Lance Freeman, 946 Clyde Avenue. When I purchased my house, me and my wife, we fall in love with the house. It's got trees, it's got grass, Clyde Estate is something special. What I just heard from my neighbors is that's going to be destroyed. The first thing, as soon as you type on Google Clyde Estates, it shows lots of letters from people I just sent into the village complaining that's going to be destroyed. I just don't understand why all this tax money is going to be spent for something that it's not needed by anybody. I went to the police department and I spoke to a few officers and I asked them when was the last time there was an accident on Clyde Avenue, and they couldn't answer that. One of the officers told me that he's got almost 20 years of experience working for Downers Grove Police Department. But Clyde Avenue the Clyde Estate was built in 1950s. It was done and it was built by an architect that it's actually, his name is put in one of the special buildings in downtown as one of the highest architects in state of Illinois. So I'm assuming that that architect knew, what he's doing, and I just don't understand why we're trying to destroy that. By doing it, half of the properties of these owners is going to be cut in half just because of a sidewalk. All these trees are going to be destroyed, or the roots of these trees going to be destroyed just for having sidewalks. That, once again, it's just a waste of taxpayers' money to me. I hope that I'll be able, to join next week the meeting and to meet with the architect who is trying to do all that and answer all our questions. But as far as I know, there is 2 more places in Downers Grove that they don't have sidewalks there, and that policy to me is like, well, they speak French in Canada, so we got to speak French as well. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, sir. Other questions or comments of a general nature? Dr. Goodman, welcome back.
Good evening again. Gordon Goodman, 5834 Middaugh. And I rose earlier to suggest that when you consider your historic preservation ordinance, the staff would do well to consult the Park District and find out what modifications of the ordinance would make it possible for the Park District to look for historic landmark status for its property. It occurs to me that it would also be a good idea for your staff to consult the residents of Clyde Estates and find out what they would need in order to be able to recognize their area as historic district in Downers Grove. It has a great integrity. Those homes have been relatively uniformly built in the 50s. They have preserved their appearance. It is an outstanding historic district in town, and it would be very nice if your ordinance provided safeguards for them so that they could follow the inclinations that they've tried to persuade you to observe. So look at the larger picture here. This is a very distinctive neighborhood, more than 50 years old, that you might well want to help preserve itself with your historic preservation ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Goodman. Other comments or questions of a general nature? Mr. Lazar, welcome back.
I've already had time in front of the council, so I'll be very brief. I am going to change the topic, if that's okay. This morning, I joined a walkthrough on the proposed route for the moving of the structure at 942 Maple. And I was very pleased to see 2 commissioners in attendance, and thank you for taking such an active interest. I was also pleased to see that the developer was making legitimate and significant efforts to adjust the path of the structure to minimize the impact on the trees. And so I still think the impact on trees is still significant, but again, glad to see what I would say is really tangible progress. The concern still remains, though, over the use of $140,000 of taxpayer money to fund a private ownership. It's a big expense. It's a horrible precedence. Let me ask a question, and Mike, maybe you could provide the answer. Do you know what the 2015 budget is for the Architectural Design and Review Board? Goose egg, 0. So what could they do with $140,000? We talked about incentives. How many properties could they protect with that much money? I'd argue you can get a district. It's enough incentive to get a district together. And so when we think about that amount spent on one property, I just want to put it in perspective. If you consider that, I'd sure appreciate that. I also have to, unfortunately, clarify something for the record as requested by the Morton Arboretum. I don't want to make sure nobody is misled in any way. You may be aware that several Maple Avenue neighbors, myself included, marked some of the trees that were to be impacted by this move of the structure at 942 with some green ribbon and some signs. And included in those signs were some of the signs included ones I secured from the Morton Arboretum, which serve to highlight the various benefits the trees provide, right? They clean the oxygen, they those type of things. And the signs and pamphlets like this are made available by the Arboretum to schools, organizations, anyone that really requests them. Apparently, one or more people was offended by the signs. They made multiple calls to the Morton Arboretum to complain. In turn, the Morton Arboretum called me to say, hey, what's going on? So on their behalf, I want to clarify for the record that while the Morton Arboretum did supply the signs, they are not taking a position on the proposed move of the structure at 942. So I don't want anyone to inadvertently been misled that that was somehow endorsed by the Arboretum. Thank you.
Sir? Other questions or comments of a general matter?
Laurel Bowen, 829 Clyde Drive. The first letter that we got from the village regarding this redevelopment project was May 9th. And this was after the RFP that went out to the contractor
What are you referencing?
that was in March.
Are you talking about your sidewalks?
Can I finish speaking?
I just want a clarification what you were referencing to a letter. I didn't know what you were.
I said the first letter that the residents received about the redevelopment project in Clyde Estates was on May 9th.
Okay.
And that was after the RFP that went out to the contractors in March. So they did not consult with the residents at any time until August. This letter states that a series of neighborhood meetings will be scheduled for this project to allow for resident input and questions. These meetings will be held over the summer, and you will receive a separate notice for each. Well, we never had summer meetings, and we didn't have a series of meetings. We had two that were scheduled very inconveniently. August is a holiday month, and November is around Thanksgiving, and they were both on work nights at 6:30 p.m. Now, related to the 20th meeting, Mr. Barnett, I'm responding to your comment about the attendance at those meetings. I have the attendance sheets that I asked for, and I was at one of them because I could not go to the first one in August. The first meeting, there were 34 people there representing 24 homes. There are 65 homes in Clyde Estates. The second meeting, which I attended, there were 25 people there, represent 20 homes. So in total, 28 homes were represented at those two meetings, and that was not even half of the entire representation of Clyde Estates. I take issue with the comment made on the staff notice on January 21st that was previously referred to by Nan Newland. And since there were no public record of either of those resident meetings, none of you, nor those residents that were unable to attend those meetings, they cannot go to any of those records that they're not in existence because no recording was made. So you cannot see what comments, questions, complaints, anything, suggestions about the proposed plan that we still don't know what it is. And the comment was made that I lost my place. Several residents have expressed general opposition to the construction of new sidewalks. At the meeting I attended, 25 people, it was asked, how many people want sidewalks? 2 people raised their hand. They already have sidewalks. They're at a place on Washington that sidewalks were installed about 5 years ago. So where do we get the several residents have expressed general opposition? The whole meeting was opposed to it, but no record is made, so we can't prove that. I would like to know, Lost my notes. Here they are. Who is directing this operation? Because it seems like there seems to be different discussions from different people, and people have different ideas about it. Exactly what has prompted this project now after 33 years of no paving, which is really what we want. That's all we want. Have any of you been to Clyde Estates and reviewed the plans for rebuilding our neighborhood? Let me tell you about Clyde Estates. It was created in 1952. I called the county recorder's office, so I found that out. 65 homes, I can count myself. We have about 100, a few more than 100. The community is made up of 7 horseshoes. So the roads just wind around like that. We have 2 dead ends with 1 house on each, but we want to put a sidewalk on those dead ends that go nowhere. 10 people in our community did not get letters that I know of because I've talked to most of them. Where's the traffic study? I asked for one from the police department because they have it. There's been no accidents or fatal injuries or any injuries in Clyde Estates. And you've heard from 2 residents that live there that said that they're not aware of any either, and they've lived there longer than I have. I'd like to know where the hydrology study is too, because if you're going to be building ditches and supposedly addressing a stormwater issue, but you're putting a ditch where the highest location in Clyde Estates and the village is, you're not really putting a ditch where the stormwater collects. And then you put a sidewalk around a block where there are no houses. There's 2 houses and their backyards are what is going to get the sidewalks. So, and at least one driveway is going to be redirected. For what reason, I have no idea, because they're going to be rebuilding the road. The current plan also requires 8 sidewalk crossovers, but what I mean by that is you're crossing over a street on this side where the sidewalk is to the sidewalk on the other side. And if you're going to supposedly address a safety issue with traffic, why are you crossing over streets 8 times in a community of 65 homes where most of and it's not a through street except Washington. Washington's the only through street in our entire community.
You've already gone through your 5 minutes. If we could try to wrap up your comments tonight, we'd appreciate that.
Yes, I would hope that you would take a walk over, a drive over to Clyde Estates and just look at our unique community. Also, I wanted to address the salt issue. You're salting at intersections, and a lot of slush is developing there because the snow is not being plowed off of the intersections that you're salting. So it would be a good idea to plow before you salt, because then the snow would be removed and you wouldn't be creating slush there. That's a traffic hazard too. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bowen. Just for the record, there will be another neighborhood meeting scheduled for a 3rd in the series, and I do believe August constitutes a summer meeting. As far as the recording of...
Series of summer meetings?
There's a series of meetings, so there'll be 3 altogether after the next one.
I'll show you the letter.
As far as the recording of the neighborhood meetings, I don't believe we record those meetings. They're meant as informal interactions with village staff. Personally, I have a level of trust with our staff to hear back from them and understand what happened at those meetings. They're designed to be kind of the kitchen table and informal exchanges between staff and residents. So I appreciate your attendance at the one meeting.
Informal about a $2.5 million development that you don't want to hear from the residents, you want to hear from the staff.
We've just heard from you tonight for about 10 minutes worth. So we've heard from your neighbors, we've heard from a lot of people in Clyde Estates, both via email and other correspondence. We are in the midst of planning this project. It is a big project, you're right. It's a bundled project. That's why the numbers are so high. It's not only a road reconstruction, but it's a drainage, it's a sidewalk, it's pretty much everything project. So we are going out of our way to make ourselves available to you, this council, as well as our village staff. So thank you for your comments tonight. Appreciate them. Any other questions or comments of a general matter? Seeing none, we'll move on to back to item number 5, councilmember reports. Any reports from the village council tonight? Commissioner Jose.
Thank you. Just real quick, wanted to make sure the folks know that the Downers Grove Museum has opened a new exhibit It's called Fighting Fire, the history of the Downers Grove Fire Department. Opened January the 24th and is open until May the 30th. And let's see, the museum's public tour hours are 1 to 6 p.m. on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and on Saturday from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. I got to see it for a few minutes. I thought it was a great exhibit. They've got a little piece for kids. My daughter got to paint a little bit of the Downers Grove Fire Department logo, and I imagine there's probably still a little portion of it that if you want to take your kids by, maybe they'd get a chance to paint on that too. It was a pretty good sized logo, about yay big. Hope folks will take advantage to go down and learn about the history of our first responders. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any other council member reports? I don't even have a report tonight. Any items of new business from my colleagues on the village council? Seeing none, can I have a motion to adjourn, please?
So moved.
Second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? None. Thank you for joining us tonight. We are adjourned.